Chapter 1022. Charge. The 1,000 black knights who could not wait any longer shouted loudly. Then the sound of iron hooves thundered on the ground, signaling the start of the charge. The ground trembled. The 500 soldiers of the Siamese army who were sleeping were awakened by the noise. They looked for the source of the noise and saw a shocking scene. In the dark night, countless black shadows came, followed by flashes of silver light. The men borrowed the speed of the horses and the power of the swords. The silver swords, which were better than ordinary iron weapons, were swung. Countless heads flew and countless weapons were cut in half. The appearance of the Black Knights took the Siamese army by surprise. The 500 soldiers were chopped down like vegetables. In just one exchange, 300 of the 500 soldiers had fallen. Under such a powerful force, the remaining Siamese soldiers had lost the courage to fight. They covered their heads and ran away, screaming for help. Some of the more timid ones even knelt down and surrendered. The appearance of the Black Knights was like the Grim Reaper in the dark night. The powerful combat strength they displayed was daunting. There was no way to resist at all. The 500 well-prepared Siamese soldiers were so vulnerable, let alone the other Siamese soldiers, who had been tired from the siege for a day. Many of them had their tents torn open while they were still asleep, and they lost their heads in their sleep. Against an enemy that was 4 times their number, the Shadow Cavalry showed their strength and ferocity. Every time they swung their swords, an enemy's head would be cut off. Every time the horses galloped, red blood would flow, and the screams of countless enemies would be heard. The scene below the city quickly alerted the Cambodian soldiers on the city tower. The news was reported to Governor Sun Xiaoguang and General Dagan. They rushed to the city tower and saw that the Siamese army was almost completely wiped out. "It's the Black Knights. It's Long Wei. It's the 6th young master." Governor Sun Xiaoguang, who was knowledgeable, used the only night vision telescope in the city to see what was happening below the city. Then he could not help but scream in excitement. Only Yang Qindong's appearance had such an influence to make a provincial governor lose his composure. "Quick, open the city gate. Let's go out and welcome the 6th young master." Sun Xiaoguang was so excited that General Dagan couldn't believe what he was hearing. Was this still the calm and steady Governor Sun? Under Sun Xiaoguang's urging, the city gate was opened. He led General Dagan and 3,000 Cambodian soldiers out of the city. At this time, the battle outside the city had ended. In less than 2 hours, nearly 5,000 Siamese soldiers had been wiped out. It seemed shocking, but it was not a big deal that a Black Knight only needed to kill 4 to 5 people. Outside the city gate, someone was leaving the city. Naturally, a Black Knight reported the matter to Yang Qindong. Under the protection of Beta Persei and the others, Yang Qindong rode his horse and saw Sun Xiaoguang with the help of the torchlight. At this moment, Sun Xiaoguang also saw Yang Qindong. From afar, he knelt on the ground and shouted, "6th young master, long live the 6th young master." As Sun Xiaoguang knelt, the people around him also knelt and shouted, "Long live the 6th young master." People in this era were deeply influenced by the feudal society. It was common for people to kneel on the ground. "Get up." Yang Qindong was already numb to it. It could even be said that he was used to it. After Governor Sun Xiaoguang received permission, he stood up and took a few steps forward to Yang Qindong. He said excitedly, "6th young master, have the Siamese soldiers been wiped out?" "They've all been wiped out. No one survived. Since you're here, I'll leave the matter of Lijiang Taoist Temple to your Cambodian army." Yang Qindong had a warm smile on his face. As soon as he finished speaking, General Damien immediately stood at attention and saluted. Then a large number of Cambodian soldiers went to the chaotic Siamese camp ahead. Governor Sun Xiaoguang was left behind. Before he could ask, Yang Qindong took the lead and said, "This time, I'm the only one who came in advance with 1,000 Long Wei soldiers. The other reinforcements are coming here one after another. As long as we can hold on for a while, the danger will be gone. By the way, what's the situation here now?" Hearing that only the 6th young master came with 1,000 Long Wei soldiers, Sun Xiaoguang was shocked. There were 5,000 Siamese soldiers here, but they were all killed by 1,000 people. It was said that the 6th young master's Long Wei soldiers were invincible on the ground. It seemed that it was not an exaggeration. Sun Xiaoguang organized his thoughts and answered Yang Qindong's question. "The 6th young master, the situation is not very good. Previously, in order to solve the siege of Suwang City, I sent 5,000 Cambodian soldiers. Unfortunately, they were wiped out before they could even enter the city. Now, only the deputy governor, Ding Ding Wei, led 1,000 Cambodian soldiers and 200,000 people in the city to resist. Their survival is uncertain." "Oh? Hasn't Suing City been captured yet? Hearing this answer, Yang Qindong asked with a little surprise. I haven't received any news yet. There is no radio in the city. I really don't know what's going on there. Sun Xiaoguang replied with a little embarrassment. Yang Qindong and Sun Xiaoguang were worried about the situation in Suing City. Here, torches were lit on the city walls and people were busy. The deputy governor, Ding Dingwei, was using the night to strengthen the city's defenses. Previously, Suing City was breached by the Five-Star Army. The city walls were also attacked by cannons and were riddled with holes. This was all thanks to the arrival of the Five-Star Army. After occupying the entire Cambodia, Suing City was an important transportation hub. The city walls were strengthened, and because of this, the city was able to withstand the attacks of 100,000 Siamese soldiers for several days. Of course, this had a lot to do with the deputy governor, Ding Dingwei, guarding the city. In fact, on the first day of the Siamese army's attack, the general guarding the city was already dead. Since then, Ding Dingwei had the final say. Because of this, some of his ideas were realized, such as using the power of the people to defend the city. In ancient times, there were situations where the people and soldiers defended the city together. However, this was mostly because the army had won the hearts of the people. After Suing City was occupied by the Five-Star Army, land was distributed, trade routes were opened, and a series of heavy taxes and slave systems were abolished. Because of this, many people were able to live a better life. Once the people's lives improved, they would naturally feel grateful. They would also be filled with more yearning and hope for the future. At this time, the Siamese army came. They wanted to let the people live their lives again. Therefore, the first to disagree were the local people. In order to protect the fruits of their victory, many people wanted to contribute. However, because there was no name and no organization, it was difficult to form a strong force. Ding Dingwei only appeared as an organizer. At the same time as the deputy governor of Cambodia, he gave these people a name. In this way, the power of the people was maximized. The originally weak city became a nail that was fiercely stabbed into the wall. The Siamese army could do nothing about it. To fully utilize the role of the people, Ding Dingwei first ordered people to open up the armory in the city. He took out the weapons and armor stored inside and distributed them to the adult men of Jiwei City. Then he opened up the storehouse in the city and took out the small amount of gold and silver stored inside. He also handed over the gold and silver to the Yang family bank that had just been built in the city. This action had caused the manager of the bank to loudly reprimand him. Whether it was the warehouse in the city or the Yang family bank's warehouse, no one was allowed to touch it without permission. Otherwise, it would be a felony. Even if Suing City was captured, these things would become the spoils of war for the Siamese army. However, as long as the city was not captured, these things would not be touched. However, this rule was forcefully broken by Ding Dingwei. I, the deputy governor, will not take a single cent of this gold and silver. It will be used as a reward for the soldiers and civilians who defended the city. If someone questions me about this matter, I will bear all responsibility. Ding Dingwei answered the bank manager and the official in charge of the treasury in this way. The gold and silver were taken out and piled up under the city tower for the 200,000 people to see. As more and more people gathered around, Ding Dingwei found a high place and stood. He said loudly, "These silver taels are for the warriors who defended the city. Next, whether it is soldiers or ordinary people, as long as you do something beneficial to the defense of Suing City, you will be rewarded. With these silver taels, I will not go back on my word." This was the promise that Ding Dingwei made to all the people in the city. Now that they had the money, the next thing was the name. Ding Dingwei sent people to put up notices all over the city. It was written in detail that any citizen, no matter what clan they were born in or where they came from, as long as they could pick up a sword or a spear or carry a stone, they could sign up to defend the city. If they died in battle, their loved ones would be given a pension. Once they performed a meritorious deed, they would report it to their superiors and be rewarded accordingly. Suing City was a big city. There were 200,000 people in the city. There were Han people, grassland people, Koreans, and people from Luzon and other countries in the southeast. After the notices were posted, the Han men were the first to sign up. As people who benefited from this, now that the city was in trouble, they were the first to step up. With the Han men taking the lead, more people started to sign up. Among them there were some women who were in good health. They could also move the stones under the city. Ding Dingwei waved his hand and issued weapons to them. He allowed them to enter the city and fight. Chapter 1023. As a result, Suing City, which originally only had 1,000 Cambodian soldiers, was filled with soldiers. In a short period of time, more than 10,000 people had signed up to defend the city. Ding Ding Wei divided them into groups and tried to make sure that every group had some soldiers who knew how to fight. That way, with a leader, they would have a higher chance of winning the battle. The courage of the people was very good. Whether it was to protect their homes, their families, and the fruits of their labor, or because of the rewards, they all climbed up the city walls without exception. However, when it came to fighting with the enemy as they had not been trained, their weaknesses were quickly exposed. For example, some people were so nervous that they didn't wait for the Siamese army to climb up the siege ladders. They threw the stones down the ladders, but it didn't work. Some people were so nervous that they threw their swords down the ladders. When they realized that the enemy had climbed up the ladders, they threw their swords down. They had no choice but to fight the enemy unarmed. Some people saw people around them fall down. They saw blood flowing all over the ground. Some people's heads were chopped in half. Some people's intestines were flowing out of their stomachs. They couldn't help but vomit. They didn't have the strength to do anything. Too many accidents happened, and because of that, the number of deaths increased. Cries of agony filled the city walls. Ding Ding Wei did not cry. It was not that he did not want to cry, but that he could not. As the only commander, as the backbone of everyone, he could not show the slightest bit of soft-heartedness. The only thing he could do was to distribute the gold and silver to the families of those who had rendered meritorious service and the fallen warriors, keeping his promise. As a result, the limited amount of money soon shone. In the end, Ding Ding Wei had to write IOUs. According to him, as long as they could defend Suwing City, they could come to him with IOUs. He would pay them one by one. Regardless of whether they received the money or IOUs, at least they had hope for the future. On the other hand, once Suwing City was breached, everything they had now would be for naught. Even if it was for their own future, they had no choice but to defend the city. With such a firm belief, countless people picked up their swords and spears and rushed up the city walls. They resisted the onslaught of the 100,000 Siamese army. General Tong Si, who was leading the army, was originally full of confidence in taking down Suwing City. At one point, he had thought that he would be able to take down a city with only 1,000 defenders in less than half a day. However, he had already wasted nearly 10 days here, and he was still unable to take over the city. This made him very angry. What made him even angrier was that news came from the front, saying that the 5,000 vanguard troops sent out had all been killed at the foot of Golden Rim City. The 5,000 heads were made into a statue, which stood at the foot of the city as a warning to the world. Rebellion, rebellion. Hearing that the attack on Golden Rim City was not going well, General Pomelos was furious and ordered to continue attacking Suwing City. He might be able to bypass this place, but if the attack on Golden Rim City did not go smoothly, he would not even have a base for his rear. If that was the case, how were they going to treat the injured if there were too many? Once the rations were insufficient, it would be very troublesome to transport them. In the long run, Suwing City had to be taken down. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to carry out their plans. At the foot of Suwing City, the sound of the bugle horn became more urgent. More and more ladders were sent out and more soldiers were sent out to attack. However, all of this was in the hands of the soldiers and soldiers of Suwing City. They were still unable to succeed. Day after day of attack, in addition to losing more and more lives, Suwing City was still standing on this piece of land, and the 5-star flag was still flying high above the city. The siege of Suwing City was still ongoing. Under the leadership of Gao Xiong, the 1st Sea Division rushed all the way to the Gulf of Siam. Here they encountered the 50,000 Siamese navy who were already prepared. As if they knew that the 5-star army would appear here, Gao Xiong and his men had just entered the sea when the scouting ships in front of them returned. They reported that more than 800 ships with the Siamese flag were coming from all directions, and they looked like they were about to surround them. They are seeking death. Pass down the order, we will attack after they enter. Gao Xiong's expression did not change. Previously, they were able to easily wipe out the Dafei Navy with Western cannons. Now that they were facing the Siamese Navy, whose cannons were even more backward, what was there to fear? After the order was given, the entire 1st Sea Division became excited. Previously, when the 2nd Sea Division and the 4th Sea Division joined forces to deal a heavy blow to Ma Keqing's pirate army, they were envious when they heard the news. Now they finally had a chance to fight a big battle. Compared to the time when the 2 divisions defeated 60,000 pirates, this time, they would have to face 50,000 Siamese Navy, and their contribution would only be greater. At this moment, the ships maintained a safe distance and began to move slowly. The scouting ships in front of them constantly sent back information through the flag. 2 hours later, the two sides finally met in the Gulf of Siam. Looking from afar, the 50,000 Siamese navy was huge, and they were densely packed together as if they were endless. However, the soldiers of the 1st Sea Division only became more excited. At least, there was no trace of nervousness or fear on their faces. They knew that the enemy's cannons couldn't hit them, and they could aim at their targets as much as they wanted. What was there to be afraid of? The Siamese Navy General Ming also saw the 5-star army from afar. When he saw that there were more than 100 ships, which was less than 1/6 of their strength, his face was full of confidence. "Haha, order the entire army to attack and surround them. Don't let a single one of them go." Before the news of Ma Keqing's defeat had spread, the Siamese Navy had already sent themselves to their deaths. This was the tragedy of the lack of information. This was destined to be a battle without suspense. At the same time, it was also destined to be an unequal naval battle. The naval battle of Jianghu was an unequal naval battle. The difference in the tonnage of the warships of the two sides was too great, which led to the crushing defeat of the Qing dynasty. The current naval battle of the Gulf of Siam was the same. The power of the cannons, especially the attack range, was completely different. Before the battle, the outcome was already decided. The Siamese Navy, equipped with a small number of cannons, still relied on bows and spears for close combat. When they were 5 miles away from the 5-star Army's 1st Sea Division, and were still moving at full speed to engage in close combat, the sound of cannons suddenly rang out. The Siamese Navy was completely unprepared. The warships at the front were hit one after another. Some sank slowly, some broke into two, and some burst into flames. Soon they were completely thrown into chaos. In contrast, the 1st Sea Division advanced with speed. While the cannons roared, the 4 regiments and 1 division's battalion advanced in 5 different directions. One by one, the Siamese ships entered their line of sight and became the target of their cannons. The Siamese soldiers were completely outmatched in terms of military strength and weaponry. The Siamese soldiers did not even have the ability to defend themselves. In the end, one by one, they were hit by the cannons and sank into the sea without a trace. After only half an hour, the Siamese Navy, whose formation was completely messed up, began to retreat. After witnessing the power of the 5-star Army's cannons, they finally saw the gap between them. They knew that if they continued to fight, they would only be sending themselves to their deaths. The Siamese Navy's General Meng led the retreat, wanting to leave the battlefield. Hence, the cannons of the 1st Sea Division started to expand. From the previous 5 to 6 miles, the current 8 miles, 10 miles, and finally 12 miles, 13 miles. In terms of speed, the 5-star Army ships were not only larger but also faster. From start to finish, they were chasing the enemy. Often, the faster the Siamese ships ran, the faster they ran. The cannons continued to bombard, and time after time, the results of the battle continued to expand. This battle lasted from noon to night, from night to dawn, and from dawn to noon. This continued for 2 days before it finally came to an end. 50,000 Siamese soldiers and 800 ships were sunk within 48 hours. More than 200 ships had no choice but to raise their white flags and surrender. In the end, only General Meng managed to bring 30 ships back to the port. Then the port was bombarded by cannon fire. Other than General Meng, who was quick to escape with more than 2,000 men, the other 3,000 Siamese soldiers who were guarding the port were also killed by the cannon fire. In this battle, the Siamese Navy was completely annihilated, causing the seemingly powerful Siamese to become a country without ships. The 1st Sea Division continued to pursue. Other than leaving behind a few ships to take over the captured ships, the main force continued to occupy Gi and Sarm Islands, and finally reached the capital of Siam, Bangkok. If not for the fact that the capital was too far away from the coastline, the 1st Sea Division would have already bombarded Bangkok. The Siamese Navy was completely annihilated, and the 5-star Army actually chased them all the way here. While they occupied the pier, they were less than 300 miles away from Bangkok. The moment the news spread out, the King of Italy was scared out of his wits. Before he hurriedly sent out another Grade 2 General, Nayok, to lead 100,000 troops to defend the coast with Meng. This was to prevent the 5-star Army from charging onto land and threatening their south. The annihilation of the Siamese Navy caused a crisis in their south. At the same time, it also meant that the initial Siamese attack in the 5-star Army defense had turned into a stalemate. Without enough troops, the 1st Sea Division did not venture onto land. They only faced off against the 100,000 Siamese soldiers, occasionally firing a cannon to intimidate them. In Wanxiang City, Governor Luan Shaochen was constantly mobilizing troops from the province to prepare for a counterattack. In Suing City, the cost of defending the city every day was more than 1,000 men. However, Deputy Governor Ding Dingwei did not back down. He held on and waited for an opportunity to be rescued. Chapter 1024. In comparison, Phnom Penh City, which was their target, was very calm as Suwing City had not been taken down yet. Especially after the 5,000 Siamese vanguard troops were wiped out by Yang Qindong and the Black Cavalry, Siam Grade 2 General Tong Chi did not send anyone to attack. Since the enemy did not attack, Yang Qindong was ready to counterattack. The reason he made this decision was because a portion of the reinforcements had arrived. The 5th Division of the Lu Army had entered Cambodia from Chichen City and arrived at Phnom Penh City at noon. Yang Qindong personally went out to welcome the arrival of the 5th Division. Along with him were the Cambodian Governor Sun Xiaoguang, the Cambodian General Don, and the Chamber of Commerce President Dun. Dun appeared here to thank the army. Yang Qindong appeared with a group of merchants from Golden Rim City. They brought a lot of meat and hot meals. General Dagan came here to prepare for a joint attack. After discussing with Governor Sun Xiaoguang, Yang Qindong made a decision to counterattack the Siamese army and save Suwing City. Yang Qindong did not know what had happened in the city to be able to hold on until now. However, his intuition told him that without troops and food, they would not be able to hold on for long. If he did not send reinforcements, once the city was broken, the situation would change. With the arrival of the 5th Division, Don was prepared to bring 3,000 Cambodian soldiers to work with him. Along with the 1,000 Black Cavalry, they had more than 10,000 men. If they suddenly entered the battlefield, it would have a good effect. Yang Qindong left 2,000 Cambodian soldiers with the provincial governor, Sun Xiaoguang, and told them that 2 cavalry divisions from the grassland were on their way here, and that no matter what happened, they were not allowed to open the city gate until they saw reinforcements. Yang Qindong then led more than 10,000 troops north. Suwing City. Just as Yang Qindong expected, it was really difficult to defend. After all, it was a group of untrained civilians defending the city. They relied solely on their bravery. However, after defending for so long, the number of casualties was already very high, especially after the death of the 1,000 Cambodian soldiers who were originally guarding the city. There were no trained veterans on the city tower, and the situation could collapse at any time. Ding Dingwei had already climbed up the city walls many times to encourage everyone. The square in the city was filled with corpses. After a rough calculation, there were 20,000 dead and 30,000 injured. All in all, the Siamese army only had 10,000 casualties. This was the difference between untrained civilians and soldiers on the battlefield. Ding Dingwei didn't know how many nights he hadn't slept. When he was too sleepy, he would just find a place to sleep for a while. He felt as if his spirit was about to collapse. Anyone who found him and wanted to talk to him had to shout loudly. Otherwise, his ears wouldn't be able to hear any words. Even in such an atmosphere, Ding Dingwei was still holding on. He could not fall because he was the god of the Suwon people. If anything happened to him, the people who had gathered together would quickly disperse. When faced with the Siamese army attacking the city, they would not be able to resist at all. After another difficult day of defending, the Siamese finally stopped beating the war drums and the soldiers retreated like the tide. Ding Dingwei could not help but wobble and fall to the side with his eyes closed. A soldier who had followed him for many years quickly caught him. His eyes were full of tears. In the past 20 days, his master hadn't slept properly. He really didn't dare to imagine how his master had managed to get through it. Taking advantage of the fact that no one was paying attention, he used his own body as a bed and let Ding Dingwei lean against him and fall asleep. Although the bodyguard was also very tired, he persisted. If possible, he wanted to persevere until dawn, just to let his master have a good sleep and replenish his energy. However, reality did not allow him to do so. Suddenly, there was movement in the night below the city walls. First, there was a burst of gunshots and shouts in the Siamese camp. It was chaos. Soon, a cavalry came to the south gate. Someone was shouting something. The sudden change in the battle was not something a small soldier could handle. Ding Dingwei, who was sleeping, was also awakened by the shouts. He opened his eyes and asked, "What's wrong? Where am I? What's going on? Is the enemy going to attack again?" "Master, the Siamese camp was suddenly in chaos. Then there was someone shouting at the south gate. No one knows what happened." The soldier wanted Ding Dingwei to sleep for a while, but he knew that since something had happened, it could only be solved by his master. "Let's go and take a look." Although Ding Dingwei was still very sleepy, he had slept for more than 2 hours. He recovered a little. Following his duty, he walked to the south gate. At this moment, There were over 100 adult male citizens standing on the southern city gate. They held torches in their hands and looked at the cavalry below the city. All of them looked at each other but did not know what to do. Among them, one of the more impatient ones asked, "Have you sent for the deputy governor?" "Yes, yes. He should be here soon." They could not help but be anxious. The cavalry said that they were the sixth young master and asked them to open the gate immediately. They would help defend the city. Yang Qindong had many names. From the Dong Shui when he first arrived at the capital, to the war god when he defeated Walla's army, to the Duke of Loyalty, to the war god who came later, to the Heavenly Khan, to Bugnam of Gojoseon, and so on. However, there was a name that could be used anywhere, and that was the sixth young master. The sixth young master was a name that even the ordinary people under Yang Xie's rule knew. But most people had only heard of his name and had never seen him in person. Now that someone said that the sixth young master was outside the city, it inevitably attracted more attention. Some people were excited while others did not believe it. At this time, Suwing City was very dangerous. As the saying goes, a gentleman would not stand under a dangerous wall. They would probably avoid it as soon as possible. How could such a noble person risk his life? This was the reason why they did not want to believe it at all. But regardless of whether they believed it or not, wasn't their deputy governor Ding Tingwei in the city? A high-ranking official like him should have seen the sixth young master before. Then wouldn't it be obvious if he was telling the truth? "Young master, we can't open the gate with explosives." Yang Er, who was among the cavalrymen at the foot of the city wall, saw that the city wall was still closed after a long time. He was worried that the Siamese soldiers who had been attacked would come after them, so he said anxiously, "No." Yang Qindong denied. "Suwing City has been defended until now because of the high walls. It was not easy to defend for so long. How can we blow it open? Let's wait." Although he didn't know what was going on in the city, Yang Qindong had a rough idea of what was going on with the help of the torch upstairs. It looked like they were all men dressed in commoners' clothes. Based on this, he could see how difficult it was to defend the city. He had even sacrificed his life for this place. How could he possibly blow up the city gates just to enter the city a little earlier? Yang Qindong did not allow it. Beta Persei could only anxiously say to Dao Xiao, the captain of the second guard team, "Send someone to inform Commander Xiao Yining. Let's hold them off for a while." In the blink of an eye, another 15 minutes passed. There was a commotion on the gate tower. Then a middle-aged man wearing a distinctive Chinese tunic suit appeared beside the torch. Yang Qindong looked up and recognized that this man was the deputy governor of Cambodia, Ding Tingwei. "Bring me the torch." In order to let the other party see him clearly, Yang Qindong said to Beta Persei. Immediately, a torch was handed over. Yang Qindong personally held it in his hand. He first looked at himself, then shouted to the gate tower. "Deputy Governor Ding, I am Yang Qindong. Open the gate." With the light of the torch, Ding Tingwei saw Yang Qindong and suddenly shouted, "Ah, it really is the sixth young master. Quick, open the gate." When the Phnom Penh dynasty surrendered, Yang Qindong went to Phnom Penh city and had a drink with the officials there. It was at that time that Ding Tingwei saw Yang Qindong for the first time. He could not forget it. Although it was dark now, with the light of the torch, he still recognized him at a glance. After Ding Tingwei confirmed his identity, the city was suddenly in chaos. Half of the people who could live in Suwing City were immigrants from outside, and the other half were the original natives. But no matter who it was, they did not know how many times they had heard the name of the sixth young master. Now that they finally had the opportunity to see the real person, and even get close to him, who would not be excited? Soon the south gate opened from the inside. The Heike followed closely to protect Yang Qindong as they walked into Suwing City. Behind them, 3,000 Cambodian soldiers and the fifth Master Lu also followed. Soon after, the south gate closed again and everything fell into silence again. At this moment the city was very lively. Under the leadership of Ding Tingwei, a group of people guarding the city walked to the front of the horse team. When they were still some distance away, Ding Tingwei bowed his head and kept shouting. "This official greets the sixth young master. Long live the sixth young master. Long live the sixth young master." This was a group of subjects who were used to the feudal dynasty. Yang Qindong had long been used to this. He turned over and dismounted, striding forward with his head held high. This action made Beta Persei and the Heike who were following him very nervous. "Okay, don't follow so closely. These people have been guarding the city until now and have not surrendered. This shows their loyalty. How could they harm me?" Yang Qindong felt that the black cavalry in front and behind him were not conducive to his actions at all. he could not help but frown. Young master, it's better to be safe than sorry. Beta Persei did not obey the order, but had his own set of rules. Chapter 1025. Yang Chendong's safety had long become the most important thing in Yangxia. For this reason, not only did Yu Qian and the others talk to Beta Persei about it, but even the madams also talked to him about it. While Beta Persei felt great pressure, he naturally did not have the slightest intention of slacking off. Okay, you're always right. But you have to give me some space. Yang Chendong found that he could not win against Beta Persei on this issue, so he took a step back and said, well, let's step back a little. Beta Persei saw that the young master had made a rare concession, so he stopped while he was ahead and took the initiative to give Yang Chendong 2 meters of space. Although this still made it difficult for him to move freely, it was already the biggest concession he could make. At this time, Yang Chendong just happened to walk in front of Ding Ding Wei and the others who were kneeling on the ground, and he naturally reached out to help them. Ding Ding Wei's trembling body was helped up, and when he saw that the person who helped him was the 6th young master, he could not help but burst into tears, and tears flowed out uncontrollably. You've worked hard. Everyone has worked hard too. How about this? Let's find a place to have a good chat first. Yang Chendong took Ding Ding Wei's hand and looked at the people kneeling on the ground and said kindly. Next, under Ding Ding Wei's guidance, they went to the yamen in the city. In the courtyard of the yamen, candles were lit all around, and everyone sat around Yang Chendong, having a chance to get close to the 6th young master. When the news that the 6th young master had entered the city in such a dangerous time spread throughout the city, the people were restless and immediately rushed to the yamen without caring about anything else. They all wanted to see what the young man who had brought them a completely different life and hope looked like. They wanted to see their benefactor, their savior, up close. Therefore, more and more people gathered outside the yamen, and in less than an hour, the number of people had exceeded 20,000. The situation could not be controlled by just 1,000 black cavalry soldiers. Beta Persei had to send people to find the commander of the 5th Division, Xiao Yining, and the 2nd Regiment commander, Yi Jia, arrived with 2,000 soldiers of the 2nd Regiment. Only then could they barely maintain law and order. Sitting in the courtyard, Yang Chendong also felt the enthusiasm of the people, but he also saw the danger. With so many people gathered here, it was easy to cause a group incident. Once someone was squeezed, the consequences would be unimaginable. He immediately said to Ding Ding Wei, "Go and talk to the people. They can send some representatives and I will receive them. But this courtyard is only so big and it can't accommodate too many people. Most of the people should go and rest immediately. I will be staying in Suwing City for a while, and there will be many opportunities to meet with everyone." "Yes, 6th young master." Ding Ding Wei replied and turned to make arrangements. Yang Chendong took this opportunity to summon the commander of the 5th Division, Xiao Yining, and asked him about the defense of the city. 6th young master, the 1st Regiment commander, Dang Liming, has already ascended the tower and taken over the defense of the city. With the help of General De N and 3,000 Cambodian soldiers, there won't be any problems. Once a battle breaks out, the 3rd and 4th regiments can enter the battlefield at any time. You can rest assured. Xiao Yining said confidently. Well, the soldiers will have to work hard next. Yang Chendong nodded. He knew very well that once the Siamese army knew that he was in Suwing City, their attack would be incomparably crazy. A tough battle would be inevitable. 6th young master, please rest assured. With the 5th Division, no enemy will be able to ascend the tower and enter the city. Xiao Yining stood at attention, full of confidence. I believe in the soldiers. Yang Chendong's eyes showed appreciation. The cold warriors should have such awareness and confidence. No matter what difficulties they faced, they must have confidence first. If they didn't even have confidence, then they had already lost half of the battle. Xiao Yining left to arrange the defense of the city, and Ding Ding Wei quickly came back. This time he was accompanied by more than 20 representatives of the people. Under their persuasion, the other people had already retreated. Yang Chendong smiled and invited everyone to sit down in the courtyard. He also asked Beta Persei and the others to make hot tea and deliver it to everyone. Everyone got up one by one to express their gratitude and sat down again. At this moment, Yang Chendong's voice sounded. How is it? It must have been hard to defend the city for a while. I really don't know how you, with only 1,000 soldiers, managed to hold on until now. When this question was raised, Ding Ding Wei immediately put down the teacup in his hand and fell to his knees with a plop. He cried out loudly, 6th young master, this official is guilty, this official is guilty. Hey, don't kneel, get up and talk. Yang Chendong signaled to Beta Persei with his eyes. Beta Persei stepped forward and helped the kneeling Ding Ding Wei up. Ding Ding Wei, who was helped up, still didn't dare to raise his head and said, "Sixth young master, I acted on my own initiative and mobilized the people. At the same time, I opened all the storehouses in the city, and even took out the money in the Yang family's bank and said that I wanted to give it to the people who had contributed to the defense of the city. But the war was too fierce and the money from before was not enough. I had to write some IOUs to them. Sixth young master, this time, Suing City was able to defend until today because of the full support of the people. You can punish me, but please cash in all the IOUs in their hands. I am guilty, I am guilty." As he spoke, Ding Ding Wei continued to kowtow to the ground. Fortunately, Beta Persei was prepared and helped him up again. There was such a thing? Yang Chendong was also surprised. He thought that Ding Ding Wei must have used some method to get the people to help defend the city, but he didn't think that he would be so bold as to touch the Yang family's bank. Under normal circumstances, if someone dared to do such a thing, he would naturally be punished severely or even sentenced to death. But in times of war, in order to achieve one's goal, all rules could be broken. Otherwise, if the Siamese army really entered the city, the Yang family's bank would not be spared. Yang Chendong, who already had an idea, didn't immediately express his opinion. Instead, he pondered for a moment before asking, "But how much money did Deputy Governor Ding promise, and how much money did he give out?" "Sixth young master, I have done some calculations. The amount of money given out is about 80,000, and the IOUs written are 50,000. The total amount is 130,000. Ding Ding Wei finished and was about to kneel down again. "All right, Deputy Governor Ding, you did not do anything wrong, nor did you commit any crime. Everything is for the sake of expediency, I can understand. The silver you mentioned, I will not send people to take it back. Not only that, once the siege of Suing City is lifted, I will also send people to pay the silver that hasn't been paid." Fearing that Ding Ding Wei would continue to shout and admit his mistake and continue to kowtow, Yang Chendong simply spoke out his own opinions and views. Ding Ding Wei, who was about to kneel down, couldn't help but raise his head when he heard this. He looked at Yang Chendong in surprise as if he didn't hear clearly. "You didn't hear wrongly. I said you did the right thing. Compared to losing 130,000 taels of silver, protecting Suing City, protecting the safety of the hundreds of thousands of people, and protecting the basic facilities of this city from being destroyed was a completely profitable matter. Why would I blame you for it? You have done well," Yang Chendong said with a laugh. This time, Ding Ding Wei could be said to have heard it clearly, and he couldn't help but cry again. He suddenly thought of the former king of Phnom Penh, Boromir. He thought that when the Phnom Penh dynasty was in danger, this person still guarded the treasury and refused to pay a single tael of silver. In the end, it led to a great defeat and the collapse of the country. The funny thing was that the silver he guarded was all taken by the five-star army in the end, but he kept it all and used it to develop the province of Cambodia. He didn't take a single cent. Now, after learning about the situation in the city, there was not a single word of questioning and criticism. Instead, there was encouragement and praise. This was such a contrast. No wonder the five-star army could have such a scale, and the Golden Rim dynasty was destined to become a thing of the past. The sixth young master is mighty, the sixth young master is mighty. The sixth young master is mighty. More than 20 people sitting on the side also said at the same time. They came here on behalf of hundreds of thousands of people in the city. The first question they paid attention to was whether Ding Ding Wei's previous promise would be recognized by the sixth young master. Now that they had personally heard Yang Chendong's words, all of them finally felt at ease and spoke in a loud voice of gratitude. "Quick, everyone, please get up." Yang Chendong smiled and helped the people up one by one with Beta Persei and the Black Cavalry. After they sat down, he continued to speak. Deputy Governor Ding's words represent the current Cambodian provincial government, and his words naturally count. But in my opinion, this is far from enough. Not enough. Everyone was confused by Yang Chendong's words. Yes, far from enough. This time, Suing City has experienced this war and now it's June. The food planted by the people has been destroyed, and there will be no harvest at the end of the year. So how can the people live? In the long run, at the end of this year, more relief food will be transferred from other cities and distributed to the people for free. Not only that, but all the food planted next year and after the new year should be exempted from all taxes. After 3 years, the tax will be paid at 30% of the normal harvest. Yang Chendong said in a firm tone. If he wanted the people to settle down and use them for his own purposes, He must be anxious about their needs and think about their needs. Only in this way can the world be peaceful and the country prosper. Long live the sixth young master. Ding Ding Wei's expression was absent-minded for a while, but when he fully understood the meaning of Yang Qindong's words, he immediately knelt on the ground again and cheered. Chapter 1026. The 20 or so people around him also knelt on the ground and cheered. It was obvious that this time, they were cheering from the bottom of their hearts. All right, everyone get up. In fact, it was not only for agriculture but also for business. For example, people who made wood carvings and krom, Cambodia's national costume, also known as water cloth, could be exempted from taxes for 2 years. In the 3rd year they only had to pay half of the business tax. In short, they had to find a way to let the people live a stable and satisfactory life again after the war. Well, in this regard, Deputy Governor Ding is an expert. You can write an application. I'll look at it later. If there are no problems, I'll approve it. Yes, I'll write it later. Ding Ding Wei said excitedly. The ancients said that after the war there would be a pandemic. This pandemic did not only refer to the plague that was easy to give birth to, but also the plague of the people's hearts. Everything had to start from scratch. Even eating was a problem. All kinds of problems were bound to follow. However, with Yang Qindong's concern and various feasible policies, there were no problems. With a good policy, the people would be able to live a stable and happy life again. Even if someone wanted to rebel, no one would follow. The conversation with Ding Ding Wei and the people lasted the whole night. When the sun rose, Ding Ding Wei's excitement was replaced by exhaustion. There were a few times when he looked sleepy. Yang Qindong waved his hand and arranged for someone to send him to rest. The people's representatives left with gratitude. They wanted to pass on the sixth young master's words and let all the people know. On the other hand, Yang Qindong turned around and headed up the city gate tower. He needed to show his face and give the other party a greater stimulation. In the Siamese army camp outside Suwing City, General Tong was angrily scolding a group of generals. Last night, their camp had been raided. There were not many soldiers who died, only a few hundred. However, the worst thing was that they did not even know who did it. This was really infuriating. After being beaten up, he didn't even recognize who the assailant was. This kind of performance was too incompetent. While he was still cursing in his tent, someone outside reported that a flag with Wu Nanwang's name had suddenly appeared on top of Suwing City. The general at the front asked General Tong to go take a look. Bugnam of Gojoseon? When he heard the name, Tong Si was stunned for a moment, but he quickly understood what the flag represented. He then sneered and said, "Hee, you've been guarding it for so long and you're still using this name. Are you trying to scare someone? Let's go and take a look. Let's see what kind of tricks they're up to this time." Tong Si had already guessed that Bugnam of Gojoseon was Yang Qindong, but he didn't connect the two together. In his opinion, Suwing City had been under siege for a long time, but it was still a city under siege. How could Yang Qindong be here? Someone must be trying to use the flag to intimidate him. Tong Si, who looked as if he had seen through everything, arrived at Suwing City. When he looked up nonchalantly, he saw a man wearing a golden cape standing on the city gate tower. As a second-rank general of Siam, Tong Si had never seen Yang Qindong in person. However, he had seen a portrait of him. Now that he took a closer look, wasn't this person very similar to the person in the portrait? Could this person really be Bugnam of Gojoseon? A row of armored generals appeared at the foot of the city wall. This meant that the main character had arrived. Yang Qindong suddenly shouted, "I'm here with King Wunan of Damyang. Who is the person at the foot of the city wall? Why are you an enemy of this king? Do you want to die?" The person who came admitted his identity made Tong Si exclaim. He suddenly remembered that a scout in the army seemed to have said that he had seen Yang Qindong. He immediately said to the guard beside him, "Go to the scout camp and ask if anyone has seen the real Bugnam of Gojoseon. Tell them to come here immediately." After the arrangement, Tong Si raised his head again and looked at Yang Qindong on top of the city wall. He shouted, "You said that you are Bugnam of Gojoseon, so you are Bugnam of Gojoseon. I think you are clearly pretending. Besides, when did Suwing City become the territory of the Great Ming dynasty? This is clearly the old territory of the Golden Border dynasty. This time, we received a request from the descendants of the Golden Border dynasty to help them recover their lost land. If you are reasonable, you should leave the city early and surrender. You may be spared from death." Impudent. The former king of Golden Border, Boromir, is currently my guest. He was the one who took the initiative to give this place to the Great Ming dynasty. Who is the descendant of the Golden Border dynasty? Do you dare to bring him out to meet me? Yang Qindong had already thought of a response to this kind of excuse. After a while, the soldiers had brought 2 scouts to the front of the formation. These 2 people had been lucky enough to mingle among the common people and had seen Yang Qindong. They were brought forward. When they understood General Tong Si's intention, they raised their heads and couldn't help but widen their eyes. Then they nodded and said, "This person is the leader of the 5-star army, Bugnam of Gojoseon." That's right. After receiving confirmation, Tong Si was extremely excited. He didn't expect to be able to surround Bugnam of Gojoseon. If he could capture this person alive, what kind of merit would it be? At this moment he was unable to restrain his excitement. When he thought about the attack on the camp last night, it must be closely related to Bugnam of Gojoseon. However, there was one thing he couldn't understand. He clearly knew that Suwing City was heavily surrounded, so why did he still stay here? Could it be that the reason why Suwing City couldn't be taken was because of this person? Could it be that last night's sneak attack was to rescue him? All kinds of thoughts jumped out in his mind. Tong Si's face alternated between red and white. This was not because he was angry but because he was excited and excited. Not only him, but the other generals around him were also very excited when they found out that the person wearing the golden cloak was the country's biggest enemy, Bugnam of Gojoseon. A few generals couldn't help but volunteer. "General, please give the order. We will definitely do our best to take down the city and capture Bugnam of Gojoseon to present to His Majesty." "Yes, General, we are also willing to take the initiative to fight." Tong Si, who was also excited, knew that no matter who captured Bugnam of Gojoseon, he would be heavily rewarded. He immediately nodded and agreed, "Okay, after we go back we will have a good discussion on how to attack the city." Yang Qindong's eyesight was very good. He saw the reaction of Tong Si and the people around him. He knew that it was time to add fuel to the fire, so he shouted loudly, "This king, in the name of Bugnam of Gojoseon, requests that you immediately withdraw your troops. This way I will still be good friends with Siam. Otherwise, once this matter is over, it will be time to conquer Siam. May I ask if you can bear this responsibility?" These words sounded like a threat, but it gave a feeling of strength in appearance and weakness in heart. It was as if Yang Qindong was no longer able to defend the city, so he had no choice but to use his status to suppress them and force them to withdraw. Tong Si did not give any answer to Yang Qindong's threat. He turned and left. Now, his heart was filled with all kinds of benefits after capturing Yang Qindong. As for the rest, he had long forgotten about it. Tong Si and the others temporarily retreated. Yang Qindong also turned and walked down the tower. Beta Persei, who was following beside him, was a little confused. He looked like he wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. "Well, I know what you want to say." The young master showed up this time to attract the attention of the enemy. Only in this way Golden Rim City will be safer. Only in this way the nearby cities will not be plunged into misery and suffering. Yang Qindong explained why he had appeared. In fact, that was exactly what he was thinking. In the face of the sudden attack of the Siamese army, Cambodia province was indeed greatly damaged. He did not appear here before, so naturally he did not have the strength to catch them. But since he was here he had to end this situation. It was a pity that he had limited military strength, so he could only use himself as bait to attract the enemy. After the reason was clear, Beta Persei showed a look of surprise. Then, as if he had thought of something, he said anxiously, "Young master, if this is the case, then Suwing City is really in danger?" Yang Qindong stopped moving forward and turned to ask Beta Persei, "What danger is there to speak of? With you and Master Lu here, can't you defend Suwing City?" "As long as Beta Persei is alive, I will never let anyone threaten the safety of the young master. Haha, you should keep your life. Otherwise Kikij will come after me." Yang Qindong smiled and patted Beta Persei on the shoulder, then laughed and left. This scene made Beta Persei very excited. Then his eyes became very determined. Since the young master dared to risk his life, then there was no reason for him to hesitate. Of course he would accompany him all the way and give it his all. Tong Si returned to the camp with a group of generals. Then he couldn't help but laugh excitedly. Good, I didn't expect Bugnam of Gojoseon to be in Suwing City. This is really a gift from God." That's right. The other generals nodded in agreement, their faces filled with excitement. "Good, since Bugnam of Gojoseon is in front of us and is heavily surrounded, then we must not let go of this opportunity to capture him alive. If we can't, we can kill him, but we can't let him escape again. In this way, I order all the soldiers that were sent to the surrounding towns to come back and concentrate on attacking Suwing City. At the same time, send this news back to the country and ask for more reinforcements and artillery. As long as we can take down Bugnam of Gojoseon, it will be worth it no matter how big the price is. Yes, it's worth it. The other generals also agreed, and then a burst of proud laughter came from the military tent. On the city tower of Suwing City, 3,000 Cambodian soldiers had been distributed on each tower, ready to defend the city with all their strength. Not only that, there were more than 10,000 people in the city gathered together and asked to defend the city together. Chapter 1027. Ever since Yang Qindong's actions were announced, the people in the city spread the news. It did not take long for the news to spread throughout the city. While the commoners were cheering, many of them took the initiative to stand out and express their gratitude for defending the city. Ding Ding Wei woke up after 4 hours of sleep. He walked out of the government office and found Yang Qindong. He represented the people in the city and asked for help. Okay, I agree. Yang Qindong thought for a while and agreed to let the people defend the city. This was not because he cared about Master Lu, but because he wanted to hide his strength. Since Master Lu did not know that he led the troops into the city, he could use this to confuse him. As for Master Lu, he might be able to play a key role at the crucial moment. Hence, after Yang Qindong agreed, 3,000 of the 10,000 people were chosen as the first echelon to the city tower. They would defend the city together with the 3,000 Cambodian soldiers. There were also 500 Cold Vanguard soldiers. They took off their military uniforms and changed into civilian clothes. This was to ensure that the city tower would not be breached. Just as they finished their preparations, the 20,000 Siamese troops appeared outside Suwing City. They guarded the 4 city gates. There were 5,000 soldiers stationed at each gate. They formed a formation that focused their attacks everywhere. The 6,500 soldiers were stationed at the 4 city towers. They had a clear division of labor and their morale was high. They knew that the 6th young master was watching them from afar. This was a good opportunity to perform. An hour later, the siege army was ready. The catapults opened up a path and the boulders were thrown. Although the boulders were not accurate, the momentum was not bad. With such momentum, the 20,000 Siamese troops roared as they charged forward. The siege had officially begun. This was destined to be a tragic battle to defend the city. Considering that they could not reveal their trump cards now, Master Leng did not use the guns that he brought. A battle of swords against swords, spears against spears, and spears against spears began. Battle cries, shouts, screams, and scoldings filled the 4 city towers for an entire day. There were a few times when the Siamese army managed to charge up the city walls, but they were quickly pushed back by the soldiers of Leng Wu's Cold Vanguard. With Yang Qindong as bait, the Siamese army did not stop attacking. By the time it was dark and they had to retreat, the Siamese army had left behind more than 6,000 dead bodies and countless wounded. Successfully defending the city gate tower was not without a price. Out of the 3,000 Cambodian soldiers and the 3,000 civilians in the city, the number of casualties reached 2,000. Even the 500 Cold Vanguard warriors lost nearly 10 people, and more than 30 were injured. Yang Qindong had already expected that people would die in a war, not to mention that he had given up on the advantage of his musket. However, he could still afford such a loss. What he needed now was time for reinforcements to arrive. The reinforcements he was waiting for were the 1st Cavalry Division and the 1st Cavalry Division of the new army. There were nearly 20,000 people in total. From the moment Yang Qindong learned that the Siamese army had launched an attack, he sent a telegram to the grasslands 1st city. The 2 divisions also left the grasslands Benyugan-Dusi area on the 3rd day after receiving the telegram, which was also Liaodu, and headed towards North Korea. The North Korean government also immediately prepared transport ships. When they arrived, they set sail for the south at high speed. Just as they were about to reach their destination, the telegram operator sent another message. The 6th young master had entered Suwing City and was surrounded by 100,000 Siamese soldiers. He could be in danger at any time. Spread the news to every soldier. When we reach the shore, everyone is to advance at full speed. Anyone who slacks off will be beheaded. The eyes of the 1st Division of the Under Heaven Cavalry Division, Tianhu, shone brightly as he spoke with an unquestionable tone. Lu Jue, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division of the new army, also gave the same order. In an instant, the cavalry of the 2 divisions became extremely nervous. They constantly checked their equipment in order to reach Suwing City as quickly as possible and save the 6th young master from danger. When the news of Yang Qindong being trapped in Suwing City reached Wanxiang City, Luan Shaochen and the others could no longer sit still. Luo Pe, the commander of the Second Army, received more than 10 letters of challenge from his subordinates. Without exception, all of them requested to lead troops to Suwing City. Luo Pe suppressed all of them. The safety of Wanxiang City was more important to him. As for Suwing City, he believed that the sixth young master had already made arrangements. If he sent troops to save Suwing City and abandon Wanxiang City, he would really be a sinner. Speed up the deployment of troops. I don't care what the reason is, all troops must gather within 7 days. Otherwise they will all be severely punished. Wan Shaochen was rarely angry. He could understand Yang Qindong's actions. This could indeed draw the attention of Siam to Suwing City, but at the same time, it was also very risky. At the end of the day it was because they did not have enough troops. Otherwise, why would the sixth young master take the risk himself? Since Yang Qindong had previously handed the huge Lao province to him, at this crucial time, he had to use all of his abilities to repay the favor. The deployment of troops had not been going on for a day or two. According to Luan Shaochen's instructions, he had arranged for a certain number of soldiers to be recruited in every city in Lao province. Logically speaking, there were already reserve soldiers in every city. Gathering the strength of the entire Lao province, which had more than 3 million citizens, was not a difficult task to mobilize 100,000 strong men. The difficulty was that time was tight and the mission was important. To get 100,000 strong men to abandon their families and rush to Wanxiang City, they had to be given some time. Now that the sixth young master did not even care about his own life, what else was there to prepare? If not for the fact that he had to consider the distance between the cities, he would not even give them 7 days. After the order was sent out by the scouts, Luan Shaochen, Commander Luo Pe, Minister Long Tainan, and General He Guang started to discuss the plan to counterattack the Siam army. In Wanxiang City, there were 10,000 Lao soldiers and the second and sixth master Lu from Lungfeng. In total there were about 27,000 people. It would be difficult to break through the 200,000 strong Siam army with such a force. On the other hand, with the addition of 100,000 reserve soldiers, the situation would be completely different. At that time, second master Lu and sixth master Lu would only need to continuously charge and not care about anything else. It was still possible for them to penetrate the enemy's army and create a huge hole to turn the situation around. With 2 divisions against 200,000, there will be some pressure. However, I believe that the second and sixth master Lu will be able to do well. In the meeting room, Commander Luo Pe expressed his opinion. This time, even the sixth young master was personally involved. As the commander of the second master Lu, he had no reason to back down. Okay, I will do my best to handle the logistics. The main force of Lungfeng can proceed without worry. Wan Shaochen said. I will lead the troops with General He Guang. Things like transporting food and ammunition, cleaning up the battlefield and taking care of the prisoners will be left to the reserve soldiers. Long Tainan also stood out. This time, since it was such a coincidence, he had to perform well no matter what. He could use this opportunity to satisfy his addiction of leading troops. The 3 main characters were assigned their respective tasks. Next, it was time to take care of the public affairs. Those who needed to prepare the resources would prepare the resources and those who needed to mobilize the soldiers would mobilize the soldiers. In Wanxiang City, a storm was brewing. In Suwing City, after Yang Qindong appeared, they defended the city for another 8 days. In these 8 days, less than 1,000 of the Cambodian soldiers were left. The rest were either dead or injured. The citizens of Suwing City also paid the price of more than 4,000 lives and more than 5,000 injured. Even the soldiers of the 5th Master Lu's Lungfeng suffered more than 100 casualties. After 6 days of intense defense, they had used up all the resources that were originally used to defend the city. Fire, oil, wood, stones and even bows and arrows were all used up. They had also used up almost all the men in Suwing City. More than half of the adult men had gone up the city walls and participated in the battle. The losses were not small. Although Ding Ding Wei was still doing agitation work and wanted the other half of the men to also participate in the siege, he was still politely rejected by Yang Qindong. In this battle, Suwing City had sacrificed too much. The citizens joining the army was a voluntary matter. It was not something that could be forced. Even if these people were used, they would not be of much use. Moreover, he had been to the square more than once these days. There were many corpses and many injured people there. Many of them were untrained commoners. They were only men. Forcing them to fight with their lives on the city tower was a little too unreasonable. Sixth young master, we do not have enough soldiers. If we do not rely on them, how are we going to defend the city when the Siamese army is so fierce? Ding Ding Wei could understand Yang Qindong's love for the citizens. However, for the sake of the bigger picture, he could not help but make another suggestion. We have the 5th Master Lu to defend the city. At the very least, we have my 1,000 black cavalry. They are only citizens and have not undergone any training. Most of them will die. Yang Qindong's voice was full of determination. After he finished speaking, he waved his hand decisively. Well, it's settled. If Deputy Governor Ding is interested, you can consider organizing a reserve army and prepare to capture prisoners on the battlefield. 6th Young Master, what are you planning to do? Ding Ding Wei seemed to have thought of something. That's right. I don't plan to defend the city anymore. Let's kill our way out, attract the enemy's attention and disrupt their plans. Perhaps this will increase our chances of victory. Yang Qindong nodded silently. He did not like to be attacked passively. Seeing that the citizens in the city were almost exhausted, if he continued to defend the city, it would only increase the number of deaths. He did not want to be known as a person who took advantage of the citizens if they won the war. Of course, the most important thing was that the 1st Cavalry Division and the 1st Cavalry Division of the new army had sent a telegram saying that they had successfully landed at the port of Baji and would arrive here in 2 or 3 days. That would be the time for him to launch an all-out counterattack. Chapter 1028. Hearing Yang Qindong's reply, Ding Ding Wei could not help but cry. He then shook his head and said, "No. 6th Young Master, if you stay in the city, you can at least defend it. But if you rush out, you will be surrounded at any time. You will be isolated and helpless at any time. That is too dangerous." Dangerous? How can war not be dangerous? Don't worry, this young master knows what to do. Yang Qindong could feel Ding Ding Wei's concern from the bottom of his heart. He patted his shoulder and said, "Then it's decided. You just need to organize your men to clean up the battlefield." Yang Qindong decided to leave and called the commander of the 5th Division, Xiao Yining. "Commander Xiao, the most brutal battle has come. I don't know if you have the confidence to face the Siamese army in an open field for 3 days. Remember, within 3 days, there may not be any reinforcements and no one will replenish our ammunition. 6th Young Master, I promise to complete the mission." Xiao Yining gave a standard military salute and said confidently. This time the 5th Division came in a hurry. In order to pursue speed, many divisions and regiments did not bring their heavy weapons. They did not even bring a lot of ammunition. This was their shortcoming. But since it was the task requested by Yang Qindong, even if they used up all the bullets and destroyed all the swords, in the end, they had to bite with their teeth and grab with their hands to fight with the enemy until the last moment to complete the task of guarding for 3 days. Okay, then you go and prepare. Oh right, there is still some ammunition in the warehouse of the Yang family bank in the city. Take it and equip the troops. Yang Qindong said encouragingly. As for the ammunition in the bank, it was originally not there. He took it out from the warehouse at the last minute. A small amount of ammunition could be used to bluff their way through, but if they prepared too much, they would not be able to hide it even if they wanted to. Even so, the manager of the Yang family bank in Suwing City was still confused. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't think of any ammunition stored in the depths of the warehouse. Xiao Yining happily took his men to collect the ammunition. In Yang Qindong's opinion, with the help of these ammunition, there would be no problem in defending the upper 3 days against the cold weapon army armed with sabers, spears, swords and sticks. Little did he know that this time he was not facing less than 100,000 Siamese soldiers, but more than 200,000 Siamese soldiers. Ever since Tong Si saw Yang Qindong appear in Suwing City, he sent someone to send the news back. Then he used his authority to mobilize the Siamese army behind him. When the news reached Bangkok, King Ili Chi immediately mobilized 150,000 troops towards Suwing City, along with 50 cannons. These cannons were originally intended to be used in the siege of Golden Rim City, but because they were too cumbersome, the transportation was delayed for some time. Today all the cannons had been transported, and the first 20,000 cavalrymen had also arrived. After 6 days of siege, along with the previous losses, Tong Si's army of 100,000 had lost 10,000 men, with another 10,000 injured, leaving 80,000 men. However, as he continued to mobilize his troops, he managed to gather another 30,000 men. Now, with the addition of the 20,000 cavalrymen that had just arrived, the total number of soldiers had reached 130,000. Not only that, according to the news brought by the cavalrymen, in the next 2 days, another 130,000 reinforcements would arrive. This was equivalent to a total of 200,000 soldiers, which was very close to the number of civilians in Suwing City. With sufficient troops, cannons and cavalrymen, Tong Si was filled with confidence. He was already prepared to go all out to attack the city tomorrow. He wanted to send the main force of the army tomorrow and fight for a decisive battle. Tong Si did not know that Yang Qindong had already prepared for battle outside the city. Similarly, Yang Qindong did not know that more reinforcements had arrived as well as 50 more cannons. This directly led to many accidents and fierce battles in the following battle. Tong Si was prepared to launch an all-out attack tomorrow morning, while Yang Qindong was prepared to break out of the city in the middle of the night. This kind of unintentional timing difference allowed them to protect Suwing City. In a sense, it could be considered a victory. The sky had already darkened, and the Lu 5th Division and the 1,000 black cavalry that were preparing to leave the city with Yang Qindong had already made all kinds of preparations. However, just as they were about to leave the city, Ding Ding Wei, General De N, and the civilians of the city lined up on both sides of the road to send them off. In order to protect Suwing City, the news of the 6th Young Master's decision to lure the enemy out of the city had already spread throughout the city. The citizens who heard the news were extremely touched and came out to send him off to express their gratitude as ordinary citizens. Haha. Yang Qindong, who was already wearing a golden cloak, rode on the white dragon and smiled at the civilians who came to send them off. He could understand the feelings of the people at this moment, but he did not know what to say other than to say, "Go back." He entered the city alone, and it was true that he risked his life to lure the enemy. It was also true that he took the opportunity to protect the surrounding cities from attack. But all of this was achieved at the cost of the lives of the people of Suwing City. In a way, he had let down the people here. But they still sent him off with gratitude, so what else could he say? Only when he saw Ding Ding Wei and Da did he say a few more words. "I will go out this time to make my name known." Logically speaking, the Siamese army should not attack the city. But you can't be careless. The city gates must be closed. When you see the red signal flare in the sky, that is when you can leave the city. Understand? 6th Young Master, don't worry. We will remember. But you must be careful. Ding Ding Wei and Da said with tears in their eyes. Don't worry. With the 5th Lu Division and the Black Cavalry, no one can hurt the young master. Ah. Yang Qindong's laughter was still echoing in the air. His words made the Black Cavalry and the soldiers of the 5th Lu Division proud. They would definitely not let anyone harm a single hair on the 6th Young Master. This was their mission and mission. In order to complete this mission, they were even willing to give up their lives. While his laughter was still echoing in the air, the city gates of Suwing City were opened. The Black Cavalry led the charge out, followed by the soldiers of the 5th Lu Division. After that, the city gates were closed, cutting off Yang Qindong's escape route. The Black Cavalry suddenly came out of the city and launched a fierce attack on the Siamese army's camp. For a moment, the sound of people shouting and horses neighing could be heard. In the main tent of the Siamese army, Tong Si was lying down. He had just fallen asleep when he was awakened by the battle cries. Then a subordinate came to report that someone was breaking out of Suwing City, led by a group of cavalry. After hearing the news, Tong Si put on his armor and said loudly, "It must be Yang Qindong trying to break out of the encirclement. Isn't it a little too late to escape now? Order the other city gates to not move, in case the enemy is trying to lure us away. Order 20,000 cavalry to move out and order the cannons to fire in that direction. Order 50,000 mobile troops to be ready. They will depart with me in half an hour. General, fire the cannons now. There are still many of our brothers outside the southern gate." The messenger could not help but panic when he heard the order. "It doesn't matter. Losing some men to kill Yang Qindong is worth it no matter how I look at it. Let's just carry out this order," Tong Si said without hesitation. At this moment, the only goal in his mind was to kill Yang Qindong. In order to achieve this goal, everything else could be sacrificed. Outside the southern gate, the Black Cavalry led the charge into the enemy's camp and launched a frenzied attack on the 5,000 Siamese soldiers. With every swing of their swords, the Siamese soldiers fell to the ground one by one. Their corpses were strewn across the ground, emitting the stench of blood. The Black Cavalry was brave and fierce. The 5,000 Siamese soldiers were no match for them. Very quickly, other than those who were killed, the rest of the Siamese soldiers escaped without a trace. Yang Qindong, who had also killed a few enemies on his horse, chuckled. He then ordered the 5th Lu Division to leave immediately and head towards the barren hills in the southwest direction. He had landed there when he arrived and it was a good place to attack and defend. After Yang Chendong defeated the enemy, he led the 1,000 black cavalry out of the battlefield. The 1st, 2nd and 3rd regiments of the 5th Lu Division left with them. Only the 4th Regiment stayed behind to cover the rear. The 4th Regiment was the cause of the accident. The 4th Regiment commander, Ru Kai, followed the original plan and walked at the back to ensure the safety of the army. The group didn't seem to be in a hurry, and Ru Kai didn't seem to be in a hurry either. With the gun in his hand, he was confident that he wouldn't be afraid even if the enemy chased after him. As long as he could hold them off for a while, the barren hills a dozen li away from the city would form an effective defensive formation. At that time he would be absolutely safe. Ru Kai was very confident, but he had forgotten one thing. Or rather, he had overlooked one thing. What if the other party also had firearms? This was a common problem not only for Ru Kai but also for most of the officers and soldiers of the Cold Front. They were used to fighting enemies who did not have firearms. Over time, a subconscious thought formed that other than them, the other enemies did not have firearms and did not know how to use them. It was this bad habit that led to the problem. Just as the 4th Regiment was moving towards the barren hills, the sound of cannons suddenly rang out. When Ru Kai heard the sound of the cannons, he even had the misconception that the cannons were from his side. When the cannons were fired, they should not be attacking him. It was precisely this kind of thinking that occupied the dominant position, which prevented him from lying on the ground at the first moment, nor did he make any defensive movements at the first time. As luck would have it, one of the cannonballs landed about 10 feet away from him. Then one of the cannonballs hit his chest and abdomen. Ru Kai was in so much pain that he almost fainted. Chapter 1029. At the same time as Ru Kai, there were also a dozen or so soldiers who were injured by the bombardment. They were all careless and did not think of dodging at all, so they were hit by the aftershocks of the bombardment. Some of them were even more unlucky and were directly killed by the bombardment. The entire 4th Division was in chaos. Feeling the pain getting worse, Ru Kai bit his lips and forced himself to stay alert. At this time, the Vice Commander Xian Yuan rushed to his side. When he saw Ru Kai's pale face and the blood on his body, he cried out in shock, "Commander, you're injured?" "It's okay, it's just a small injury." Ru Kai forced a smile. As soon as he finished speaking, the sound of horses galloping could be heard. Ru Kai's expression changed. This time, he had a feeling that it wasn't the 6th Young Master and his black cavalry. From the sound of the horses galloping, there were at least 5,000 of them. This was definitely not something the black cavalry could produce. Ru Kai was shocked that the Siamese army had artillery and cavalry. However, he still said in a serious tone, "How about this, Deputy Commander Xian? I order you to immediately retreat with the main force of the regiment. All the injured soldiers will stay behind and cover the rear with me." "No, Commander, I will stay behind and make arrangements to bring you away." Xian Yuan shook his head. His tears flowed down uncontrollably. "It's no use. I know my body. Under such circumstances, it's hard to save me. All right, follow my orders. Quick." Ru Kai shook his head. He knew that if he gave the order, Xian Yuan would really stay behind to cover the rear. However, he didn't want to leave the hope of survival to himself and push his comrades to their deaths. Not to mention he was already half dead. Even if he escaped and was saved, he would only be a cripple in the future. He was the Cold Front, the most powerful Cold Front. He would never allow himself to become a useless person. "Commander." Xian Yuan continued to call out. "Please tell the 6th Young Master that I, Ru Kai, have been very proud since the day I joined the Cold Front. I have never regretted it." With a happy smile on his face, Ru Kai ordered again, "Xian Yuan, I now appoint you as the acting commander of the 4th Division. Take the soldiers and retreat. Quick." "Yes." Xian Yuan gave a very standard military salute, turned around with tears in his eyes, and loudly announced the order. Many soldiers had already noticed everything that had happened here, but military orders were obeyed. At this moment, everyone could not stay here any longer. Many soldiers saluted in the direction where Ru Kai had fallen in the night, and then the main force of the regiment began to retreat rapidly. Just as Xian Yuan retreated with the main force of the 4th Regiment, another rumbling sound of cannons rang out. Ru Kai and the others who were already prepared for this, lay down on the ground and dodged the cannons that had no target this time. When they raised their heads, the sound of horse hooves was already very close to them. Ru Kai, who was holding the 95 style in his hand, laughed and said to the dozens of comrades around him, "Come on, let us enjoy the last battle to our heart's content, let us fight." Da-da-da. Da-da-da-da. In the dark night, the sound of gunfire continued to ring out, flying towards the approaching Siamese cavalry. Screams of agony rose one after another, until all the bullets and magazines on his body were used up. Only then did Ru Kai let out a long sigh of relief. Then his right hand went to his waist and took out a grenade. He shouted to the others, "Take out your grenades. Even if we die, we can't let our weapons fall into the enemy's hands." "Yes, sir." All the soldiers who stayed behind replied in unison. Not long after, the sound of horse hooves approached again. When they were completely submerged in the surroundings of Ru Kai and the others, a series of booming sounds rang out. It was the sound of grenades being detonated. When they heard the sound, Yang Qindong was rushing over with 1,000 black cavalry. When the sound of cannons rang out, Yang Qindong knew that something was wrong. When he asked if the 4th Regiment had caught up, he led the black cavalry back. He wanted to use the speed of the war horses to save as many people as possible. On the way back, he met Deputy Commander Shen Yuan, who told him about Ru Kai. Yang Qindong's eyes were filled with murderous intent as he said, "Let's go back. As long as there is a glimmer of hope, we cannot let a comrade fall into the hands of the enemy." The black cavalry replied in unison and followed Yang Qindong on both sides of the road. Not long after they left, the sound of grenades exploding rang out. Yang Qindong reined in his horse and saw the fire that rose into the sky 3 or 4 miles ahead. He seemed to have guessed what had happened there. "Good job, comrades. Don't worry, I'll definitely avenge you. Where is Longwei? Come with me and kill them before we retreat. We want to collect some interest first." "Collect interest." 1,000 black cavalry replied in a loud voice. At this moment, even Beta Persei did not dissuade Yang Qindong from leaving, because he knew that if he did not vent his anger, the young master would definitely not return to the barren mountains with him. In the dark of the night, the first 5,000 Siamese cavalrymen who arrived were first attacked by the Type 95. Then, a few hundred of them were injured by dozens of grenades. Before they could figure out what was going on, another cavalry unit appeared in front of them. These cavalrymen were all wearing heavy armor, so they simply ignored the ordinary sword attacks. On the contrary, the steel swords in the hands of the cavalrymen were very sharp. In a few moves, not only were the cavalrymen about to fall off their horses, but their weapons were also broken into 2 pieces. In the process of the cavalrymen's charge, a loud voice shouted, "King Wunan of Damyang is here, quickly accept your death." 1,000 black cavalry, under the leadership of Yang Qindong, penetrated through the 5,000 Siamese cavalrymen, then turned around and killed more than 3,000 cavalrymen. After almost crippling the 5,000 cavalrymen, they left. With the help of the moonlight, one could see a very obvious figure wearing a golden cloak as he left. 5,000 Siamese cavalrymen. After this ordeal, only 1/5 of them were left. Half an hour later, General Tong arrived. Seeing the tragic situation here, he asked what happened. When he understood what happened, he was naturally excited. "Haha, the man wearing the golden cloak must be Yang Qindong. Come, follow me, it's time to make a great contribution." On the barren mountains, Yang Qindong had already retreated with the black cavalry. The soldiers of the 5th Division had already set up a defensive formation. At this moment, they were digging fortifications and preparing for a long battle. At this moment, almost everyone was lowering their heads and working. They regarded the sacrifice of Ru Kai as a kind of motivation and suppressed it in their hearts, waiting for a moment to erupt. Yang Qindong stood behind the trench and stared at the darkness in front of him. Artillery first, then cavalry. He did not receive news of this in advance. It seemed that there was a problem with the intelligence network. Facts also proved that on the battlefield, any small mistake could lead to a very fatal problem. At this moment, Yang Qindong could not help but think of Yunk, the head of the Security Bureau in Southeast Asia, who was still recuperating in Chichen City. Because of his health condition, Yunk was recuperating in the first hospital of Chichen City. The intelligence here was handed over to his assistant, Golden Rooster. The name was not bad. It sounded like a golden rooster standing on one leg. However, since the beginning of the war, when Siam was preparing to send out troops, until the beginning of the war there was no warning in advance. This golden rooster was simply useless. It was precisely because of his work mistakes that they suffered setbacks on the battlefield. Now, even the 4th Regiment commander was sacrificed. Golden Rooster was unforgivable if he was to be held accountable. Send a report to Yang San. I want an explanation. I also want an explanation for the soldiers. Yang Qindong said in a cold voice. Beta Persei, who was standing next to him, could not help but shudder. He knew that someone would have to pay the price for Ru Kai's death. In the camp of the Siamese army, shortly after a grenade explosion, General Tong arrived with his men. He learned from the other cavalry that Yang Qindong had already left the city and was guarding the barren hills outside the city. He didn't run. Haha, very good, then you don't have to run. Order, surround the barren hills, not even a fly is allowed to fly out. Quickly mobilize the troops, surround this place and launch an attack as soon as possible. At the same time, send a message to His Majesty, asking for more troops. As long as we can take down this big fish, the Siamese army will soar. As Tong shouted excitedly, more and more Siamese soldiers surrounded the barren hills. The scouts of the 5th Division also kept reporting what they saw to Yang Qindong's ears. 6th Young Master, you should retreat first. It's too dangerous here. The commander of the 5th Division, Xiao Yining, stood in front of Yang Qindong and said earnestly. His life was worthless and he could put it in any dangerous place. However, Yang Qindong was different. He was the soul of Yangxia. If something happened to him, the future of the entire Yangxia would be unimaginable. I won't leave. Only by staying here can I attract the full attention of the Siamese army and ensure the safety of the other cities. Commander Xiao, I don't have to say much. If you have this time, you'd better find the position of the enemy's artillery, lock onto him, and don't let it play a role in the next battle. Yang Qindong sat on a boulder and said unhurriedly. He wanted to place himself in a dangerous place. Only then would the soldiers put their lives on the line and have a chance of winning the battle. The 5th Division possessed firearms that were more advanced than the firearms of this era, but after all, they only had 8,000 soldiers. According to the scouts, the number of Siamese soldiers surrounding the barren hills had reached more than 100,000, and the number was still increasing. This battle was destined to be extremely difficult. If they couldn't hold any ground, the consequences would be unimaginable. If he left now, it would be the same as putting the 5th Division in an extremely dangerous situation. This was not something he wanted to see. He wanted to stay and hold the fort with everyone. He believed that as long as he was here, the soldiers' will to fight would not be extinguished. Reinforcements would also arrive at a faster speed. Chapter 1030. After all, there were more than 10 times, 20 times, and possibly even more enemies. Even if they were fully equipped with firearms, once the enemy decided to fight without regard for their lives, the firearms wouldn't be able to withstand it. The firearms would be fine, but they wouldn't have enough bullets. This was destined to be a fierce battle, a huge battle. Hearing Yang Qindong's determination, Xiao Yining could only sigh and leave. Since the 6th Young Master was not willing to leave, he would not allow any enemy to reach the barren mountain, even if he had to sacrifice his life and the entire 5th Division. The Siamese soldiers continued to surround the mountain. A night passed and then a morning passed. At noon, the barren mountain was finally surrounded. If they wanted to escape from any direction, they would have to face at least 30,000 enemies. When Tong Si completed the encirclement, the final attack began. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the sound of war drums could be heard from all around the barren hills. Then, soldiers in Siamese uniforms appeared from all directions. They were either holding swords, spears, or swords and shields. They approached the barren hills from all directions. The sound of war drums could be heard in all directions, guiding the Siamese soldiers forward step by step. Looking down from the top of the barren mountain, one could see the enemy's silhouettes. They were like ants as they approached. 1,000 meters, 800 meters, 600 meters. As the enemy approached, the soldiers of the 5th Division were very calm. Long years of training had allowed them to maintain a calm heart. The Bugnam of Gojosian flag, which represented Yang Qindong's identity, was placed at the highest point of the barren mountain. Every soldier who saw it felt warm in their hearts. They firmly believed that as long as the flag did not fall, they would not stop fighting. 500 meters, 400 meters, 300 meters. When the enemy was 300 meters away, the first gunshot was fired by Xiao Yining. The bullet spun out and hit a soldier in the Siamese flag. As the Siamese flag fell, tens of thousands of guns were fired at the enemy who was approaching them. Tong Si only knew that Yang Qindong was on the barren mountain, but he had no idea how many 5-star army soldiers there were. He didn't get any information in advance, nor did he have any advanced equipment like high-powered binoculars. Everything was done by relying on the naked eye and estimation. This caused him to suffer a big loss in the first round of gunfire. Under the simultaneous firing of tens of thousands of guns, the firepower was intertwined. Among them, there was no lack of large-scale weapons like the machine guns used by the 95th Squad. The Siamese soldiers charged for less than a quarter of an hour before they were forced to retreat. Behind them, corpses littered the ground like a mountain. No one was fearless of death, especially when many of their companions were killed before they could even see the face of the enemy. This scene frightened the unprepared Siamese soldiers. When some of the shield-wielding soldiers realized that their opponents weren't shooting arrows but bullets, they realized how ridiculous it was for them to hold shields. In such a situation they could only retreat. In less than a quarter of an hour, more than 3,000 corpses were left behind in all directions. The Siamese army's first attack had ended in failure. When the news reached Tong Si's ears, he was not discouraged. Instead, he was very happy. They were all gunmen. This should be the main force of the 5-star army. Previously, he was worried that someone would impersonate Yang Qindong and come to the barren mountain. Now, it seemed that there was no need to worry. The person in the mountain was Yang Qindong without a doubt. The target had been identified. Although the guns were powerful, he had other advantages. For example, he had 50 newly shipped cannons and more than 10,000 cavalrymen. These could be his trump cards to achieve his final goal. Push the cannons up. At the same time, order 5,000 cavalrymen to get ready. Once the opportunity is right, we will charge. I want to see if their guns have an endless supply of gunpowder, Tong Si said confidently. The general gave the order and the cannons began to move forward. The 5,000 cavalrymen were also prepared. All of this was seen by Commander Xiao Yining, who was on the barren mountain. Damn it, it finally appeared. Cannoneers, confirm the target's position and adjust the gauge. Wait for orders. Xiao Yining's voice was filled with anger when he finally saw the cannon that killed the 4th Regiment commander. Yang Qindong also saw the appearance of the cannons through the binoculars, and then he smiled. Some things were still a deterrent when they were not used. However, once they were used, they would lose their deterrence. As for whether these cannons could hurt him and the soldiers of the 5th Division, Yang Qindong was not worried at all. From what he knew, other than the 5-star army, other cannons could only fire up to a distance of 3 miles. For example, Ming's self-made cannons could not even fire up to a distance of 1 mile due to various technical reasons. How could these cannons pose a threat to him? Yang Qindong's confidence influenced the other soldiers. A few of the 100mm mortars that were already set up were constantly adjusting their aim. However, they were not in a hurry to fire. The 5-star army also had cannons and their attack range was several times longer than the Siamese army's cannons. Right now, this was still not public news. Therefore, their current goal was to destroy all of the enemy's cannons as much as possible when the enemy was not prepared for it. If they could not destroy the cannons in one shot, it would not be fun if the enemy suddenly pushed the cannons forward at night when everyone's vision was blocked. The 20 mortars locked onto the cannons that were slowly moving forward. Soon they determined that the enemy had 30 cannons. After seeing that there were no more cannons, Commander Xiao Yining gave the order and shouted, "Fire!" Boom, boom, boom. The sound of cannons rang out and 20 shells were fired at the same time, covering the entire area in an instant. After a burst of fire, the 30 cannons of the Siamese army, as well as the hundreds of Siamese soldiers who were pushing the cannons forward, were all annihilated. Tong Si, who was still waiting for the news of victory, heard the sound of cannons. His intuition told him that this was not a good sign. He knew the sound and power of his own cannons. They were not as loud and powerful as this. Could it be that the enemy had brought cannons with them? The facts told him that his guess was correct. It was indeed not his side that fired the cannons. Not only that, his own cannons were all destroyed in this round of artillery fire. The 30 cannons he sent out were all turned into piles of red-hot scrap iron without exception. There were only 50 cannons in total. Losing 30 cannons in one shot made Tong Si furious. He immediately shouted, "Charge! Charge! Cavalry! Charge! I want to kill them!" The second full-scale attack began. There was no more probing. Instead, there was a continuous barrage of attacks. Wave after wave of Siamese soldiers fell in the path of the charge. 5,000 Siamese cavalrymen also launched a fierce attack from the north under the cover of the infantry. They wanted to open up a gap. As long as they could get close to the 5-star army, they could win with the advantage of numbers. "Black cavalry, get on the horses with me." Seeing the 5,000 Siamese cavalrymen charging at him, Yang Qindong knew that it would be difficult to rely on his muskets to block them all. Thus, he leaped onto his horse and led 1,000 black knights to launch a counterattack. Compared to the ordinary Siamese cavalrymen, the black cavalry was like a divine weapon. The Siamese cavalry were invulnerable, their weapons were sharp, and their individual qualities were excellent. With the help of the arrow point formation and the Type 33 formation, the Siamese cavalry was pierced through by the Siamese cavalry as soon as they clashed with the enemy. The original formation became chaotic. When the formation of the cavalrymen was broken, they could not take care of each other and could not communicate with each other. Their strength was reduced by at least half. In the face of the ferocious attacks of the black cavalry, there was nothing they could do other than cover their heads and flee. In the face of the black cavalry, who had experienced countless battles, the 5,000 Siamese cavalrymen were defeated before they could make use of their advantage in numbers. This also indicated that the second attack of the Siamese army was a failure. More than 2 hours later, the sky was almost dark. The Siamese army had paid a price of nearly 10,000 men and retreated in defeat. The barren hills were littered with corpses, and the pungent smell of blood filled the air, making it unpleasant to the nose. In such an environment, the fifth master Lu began to eat. They lit a campfire, set up a camp stove and began to cook. Although the environment was not good and the air was filled with a nauseating smell, the soldiers were exhausted after an afternoon of fierce fighting. It was necessary to replenish their energy and food. Regardless of whether they were hungry or not, they had to eat something for the upcoming battle. A bowl of hot soup, a few pieces of jerky and a box of canned fish. This was the standard meal for every soldier. Yang Qindong also had the same food in front of him. When the food was served, he did not hesitate to pick it up and eat it with relish. At this time, Yang Qindong's stomach was churning. However, he still forced himself to eat because he knew that if he did not take the lead, the others would find it even more difficult to eat. Reality proved that the role of an example was not small. When some of the soldiers smelled the unpleasant smell, they couldn't swallow their food. However, when they saw that even the sixth young master had eaten and was so happy, what else could they refuse? Every warrior forced the food into their stomachs and immediately their fatigue was reduced by a lot. This was the role of a commander. Otherwise, how could there be such a saying that a lion leading a flock of sheep could defeat a sheep leading a flock of lions? After eating the food, Yang Qindong looked at the darkening sky and ordered, "Everyone take the time to rest. The enemy will not attack for the next 4 hours. However, when the sky is completely dark, there may be a fierce battle. Everyone go into the trenches and hide. The scouts will take turns to rest." Chapter 1031. Yang Qindong had just experienced a fierce battle in the afternoon. From his point of view, the toughest moment had yet to arrive. The darkness before dawn was the most dangerous. In the main tent of the Siamese army, Tong Si was fuming. After an afternoon of all-out attacks, more than 10,000 soldiers had died and countless were injured. Most of the injuries were caused by his own soldiers trampling each other as they retreated. He could not accept this result. After 2 battles, he had a rough idea of Yang Qindong's military strength. It was less than 10,000 soldiers. However, in the afternoon he had sent out 80,000 soldiers to attack from 4 different directions. Not only had none of them made it to the barren mountains, they hadn't injured a single enemy. Moreover, they had suffered such great losses. How could he not be enraged? After venting his anger, Tong Si was in a much better mood. He started to summarize his failures and quickly made 2 important improvements. First, a large reward. Second, an inspection team was set up. The reward was announced publicly. Anyone who captured Yang Qindong alive would be rewarded 10,000 taels of silver and a promotion of 5 ranks. Anyone who killed Yang Qindong would be rewarded 8,000 taels of silver and a promotion of 4 ranks. As the saying went, when there was a large reward, there would be brave men. He believed that this method would be effective on normal soldiers. After all, once this matter was completed, it would change their lives. The inspection team was specially prepared to deal with soldiers who fled in defeat. It was not enough to motivate them with money. They also had to place a lock behind the soldiers. Once they retreated, they would be killed without mercy. In that case, he believed that even if he was tired, he would be able to exhaust the 5-star army to death. Not only these 2, Tong Si also decided to launch an attack at night. Although they were not good at night battles, they could only send the remaining 20 cannons up with the help of the night. Not only that, he also mobilized the remaining 10,000 cavalrymen. His experience during the day told him that the 5-star army was better than the cavalrymen. However, they were not without weaknesses. For example, in terms of numbers, the enemy was at a disadvantage. The 5-star army had a limited number of cavalrymen. They might be able to defend against the cavalrymen in one direction, but what if they attacked in all directions? The shadow cavalry would not be able to disperse their forces. He constantly changed his attack methods and made various preparations. 4 hours later, a set of effective attack methods in Tong's eyes was formulated. In order for the plan to be carried out smoothly, he mobilized a total of 120,000 soldiers to prepare for the attack. I don't believe that 120,000 of us can't defeat you. If we can't, reinforcements will arrive at any time. I want to see if you are made of iron. After Tong Si finished speaking, he began to issue the attack plan and order to his subordinates. Even at night, the weather in June was still very hot. A light breeze blew, and the stench of blood filled the barren hills. However, the soldiers of the 5-star army acted as if they didn't hear anything. They leaned against the trenches and slept. A good warrior must first learn how to rest, learn how to keep oneself in the best condition. Everyone pay attention. The enemy's cannons are coming up. In the silence, the scout on duty discovered something and shouted. Boom, boom, boom. As soon as he shouted, the sound of cannons rang out. Then heavy cannons landed around the barren hills, causing the ground to tremble. When the cannons landed outside the trenches, all the soldiers were awakened from their sleep. Yang Chendong was also awakened the moment the cannons landed. Then, he felt the throbbing of the white dragon horse beside him. He stretched out his arm and gently stroked the horse while listening to the direction of the cannons. As the best soldier king in the past, it could be said that he had spent half of his life dealing with guns and cannons. In this aspect, he had a sense of alertness that others did not have. The direction is northwest. Order the cannons to counterattack. Based on his experience, after roughly determining the location of the enemy's cannons, Yang Chendong decisively gave the order to counterattack. Beta Persei, who had been waiting by the side, immediately shouted with his unique loud voice. Then the cannoneers began to load the cannons. Then the cannoneers fired the cannons and landed 2.5 miles northwest. Boom, boom, boom. The 5-star army's rapid counterattack blew up 20 cannons of the Siamese army. When he saw that the 20 cannons had been blown up into scrap metal after only one round of cannons, Tong jumped up in exasperation. Attack, attack, attack on all fronts. Whoever kills Yang Chendong will be heavily rewarded and given the title of nobility. Kill. As Tong shouted, the first echelon of the Siamese army rushed out from 4 directions. At the same time, the first echelon of the Siamese army also rushed out. In the dark night, a full-scale attack began. Attack, cover the area with cannons and machine guns. If the enemy is close, throw grenades. Don't let the enemy rush up the barren hills. Yang Chendong walked out of the trenches and shouted loudly. He had already heard the sound of iron horses galloping from all directions. He knew very well that the enemy had divided their forces. Since that was the case, his role in leading the cavalry out was very limited. Furthermore, in the dark, visibility was limited. The speed of the war horses was very fast. If they really rushed out, the danger would only increase. Therefore, he left his war horse in the trenches and walked into the trenches with a Type 95 in his hand. Following Yang Chendong's orders, the cannons began their counterattack. Since there were many enemies, no one knew how many enemies would be killed at any point of attack. The machine guns of the Type 95 squad did not stop for even a moment. They continuously shot out bullets, trying their best to destroy the approaching enemies and blast them away. The sound of gunshots was like firecrackers. Bullets were fired one after another, sweeping the enemy's bodies. At this moment, human lives were the most worthless thing. However, the Siamese army was already prepared. Although there were soldiers dying in the charge every moment, the charging troops did not have any intention of stopping. They continued to charge in an organized manner. When a group of people died, another group of people would rush up to replace them. Wave after wave of attacks, the Lu 5th Division on the barren hill finally showed signs of being overwhelmed. A few of the Type 95 squad machine guns had to take a short break because the barrels were too hot. The Siamese soldiers took this opportunity to charge up to the foot of the barren hill. Then they strode into the barren hill. Blast them out. Dang Liming shouted to his comrades when he saw the enemy enter his formation. He took out a bayonet from his thigh and attached it to the Type 95. Then he was the first to charge out of the trenches. He wanted to use his actions to tell the enemy that Lung Feng was not only good with guns, he was also good with bayonets. The regiment commander rushed out, and the other soldiers also flashed their bayonets one by one. They followed closely behind and pounced towards the enemy outside the trenches. Every soldier widened their eyes and used all of their strength to deliver a fatal shot to the enemy's chest according to the requirements of the assassination training. Use the grenades as cover. Suppress the enemy's charging momentum. The battalion commander behind Commander Dang Liming shouted as he pulled out a grenade from his waist and threw it forward. Immediately there was a thunderous roar, and the Siamese soldiers roared as they repelled the enemy's attack. At the same time, Dang Liming took the lead and led a group of soldiers to kill the Siamese at the front and reclaim the position that they had lost. The machine guns that had been cooled down by cold water rang out again, suppressing the enemy's approach. This kind of repeated battle for positions happened many times that day. It was not until late at night when it started to drizzle that the Siamese troops stopped attacking. The battlefield became quiet again. Clean up the battlefield, check the injuries and check the weapons and equipment. Xiao Yining, the commander of the Lu 5th Division, patiently walked in the trenches and passed down orders to the soldiers. Sometimes he even reached out to help some of his comrades carry the bodies or bandage the wounds. Yang Qindong led 1,000 Black Knights and sat on the highest point of the barren mountain. From the beginning of the war until now, even when the trenches were about to be taken, they did not make a move. They had been conserving their strength because they knew that there would be more important tasks for them to complete. 6th Young Master, the casualty statistics are out. After a day and a night of fighting, more than 400 soldiers of the 5th Division were killed, more than 1,000 were seriously injured and 5,000 were injured. Xiao Yining said in a sobbing voice. For him, this was the biggest sacrifice he had made since he joined the Battle of the Cold Front. In the face of Xiao Yining's complaints, Yang Qindong did not reprimand nor did he console him. He only replied with 3 simple words, "Got it." After saying these words, he finally got up slowly and patted the white dragon horse beside him. "Old man, it's time for us to show our power. Are you ready?" Although it was only a war horse, the white dragon seemed to be able to understand Yang Qindong's words. It could not help but raise its neck and neighed. This caused Yang Qindong to laugh out loud. "All right, since you're ready, then let's have a big fight. Brothers, are you ready?" "We're ready." 1,000 Black Knights answered him in unison. Beta Persei was also standing among the Black Knights. After answering this sentence, he carefully took a few steps forward. "6th Master, why don't you not participate in this operation? Anything can happen on the battlefield." Yang Qindong already knew what Beta Persei was going to say. Without waiting for him to speak, he had already said, "There's no need to persuade me. The soldiers can fight with their lives on the line and be fearless. Why can't I? It's settled. We'll attack in 4 groups according to the plan." 1,000 Black Knights were divided into 4 groups. Yang Qindong, Beta Persei, 1st Brigade Leader Qiu Vi, and 2nd Brigade Leader Dao Xiao would each lead a group to attack. This was originally part of the plan. How could they change it at the last minute? Chapter 1032. Beta Persei had followed Yang Qindong for a long time and knew the temperament of the young master well. Most of the time he was easy to talk to and listen to advice. However, once he made a decision, it was not something that could be changed at any time. Knowing that it was useless to persuade him, Beta Persei spoke to Badao Jiang and Peng Yu, who were in Yang Qindong's team. "I'll leave the young master's safety to you. If anything happens, I'll kill you. Second brother, don't worry. Even if we die in battle, our souls will protect the 6th young master and bring him back safely." Badao Jiang and Peng Yu said with a solemn expression. 1,000 people were divided into 4 teams, which meant that each team had about 250 people. Due to the rain, the Siamese soldiers had to rest and reorganize. When they stopped attacking, Yang Qindong personally led them to launch a counterattack. Before they set off, Yang Qindong said to Xiao Yining, "Cook immediately and take the time to rest. The soldiers are very tired after fighting for a day and a night. I'm afraid there will be more difficult battles waiting for us. The more energy we have, the more likely we will win. 6th young master, don't worry. We will wait for your triumphant return. Hot meals will be waiting for you and the Black Cavalry." Xiao Yining stood straight and saluted. "Definitely." Yang Qindong's face revealed a confident smile. Then, he lightly clamped his legs and rode the white dragon horse in the direction of the retreating Siamese soldiers. The battle had been going on for a day and a night. Under the tense atmosphere, the Siamese soldiers were exhausted. Taking advantage of the light rain, they rested for a short while. From their point of view, the 5-star army was small in number and it was almost impossible for them to change the battle. They were tired and needed to rest. Their opponents should take this opportunity to lie down on the ground and rest. It was impossible for them to launch a counterattack and threaten the Siamese soldiers. Under such circumstances, the Siamese soldiers did not even bother to send out their sentries. In the dark night, the soldiers gathered in circles to cook. They enjoyed the warm meal in the rain to replenish the nutrients their bodies lacked. Just when the meal was ready and everyone was about to eat, the sound of galloping horses approached from afar. When the Siamese soldiers at the front heard it, they were all in disbelief. They did not believe that the 5-star army would take the initiative to cause them trouble. What right did they have? Regardless of whether they believed it or not, the cavalry of the 5-star troop was really here. Just as some of the vigilant Siamese soldiers stood up, a group of black figures emerged from the darkness. Under the light of the bonfire, the gleaming silver broadswords slashed at the frightened Siamese soldiers. The Siamese soldiers were unprepared for the sudden attack and suffered a great loss. Most of them were chopped in half and turned into corpses before they could even hold their weapons. A few lucky ones turned around and fled. They led the Black Knights to another camp and repeated the previous attack. Yang Qindong had always been at the front of his team. His physical fitness was already very good. No one could beat him in terms of both strength and toughness. In addition, the White Dragon was the king of horses. With the combination of the two, once he rushed out, no one could catch up to him. Naturally, he took the responsibility of being the tip of the arrow. His appearance was like a golden needle that quickly pierced into a person's body. Wherever he went, the Siamese soldiers, whether armed or unarmed, soldiers or generals, were no match for him. They were all killed with a single slash of his saber and fell to the ground with hatred in their hearts. Quick, keep up with him. Ba Daojiang and Peng Yu pushed their horses to their limits, but they were barely able to keep up with Yang Qindong. This made them extremely anxious, and at the same time they used all of their strength. Every time their silver blade struck down, another soul would appear on the battlefield. Although there were only around 250 people under Yang Qindong's lead, everyone forgot about this fact. All they thought about was constantly moving forward, constantly killing the enemy and constantly killing the enemy. With such high morale, the cavalry of more than 200 men forced their way through 4 Siamese military camps, each of which had at least 1,000 soldiers. However, with the advantage in numbers, they could not fight back. They could only run with their instinct. After charging into the 5th camp, Yang Qindong finally felt a trace of weakness. The speed at which he swung his sword slowed down, allowing Ba Daojiang and Peng Yu, who were behind him, to catch up. Then the two of them shouted, "Sixth young master, we have charged into the 5th camp. We have completed our mission. We can retreat now." "It's already the 5th camp?" Yang Qindong smiled as he thought about the plan to retreat after charging into 3 enemy camps. Then he shouted, "The enemy is too easy to kill. They are completely defenseless. Let's charge into 1 more camp. No matter what the situation is, we will retreat. What do you think?" Even though Yang Qindong said it in a negotiating tone, his tone was firm. Badao Jiang and Peng Yu could not say anything. They could only smile bitterly and follow behind Yang Qindong as they continued to charge forward. 2 hours later, Xiao Yining, the commander of the 5th Infantry Division, stood on a barren hill and looked into the distance. So much time had passed. Why had not a single shadow cavalry unit returned? Did something happen to them? Just as he was worrying, the sound of hooves could be heard from afar. Then the first batch of retreating units appeared. It was the 4th unit led by Dao Xiao. Their bodies reeked of blood, representing their achievements. When they retreated to the barren hill and saw that they were the first batch to retreat, he could not help but be shocked. "Sixth young master, and the rest did not return?" "No, you are the first unit." Xiao Yining replied honestly. "What? That won't do. I have to go and receive them." This result shocked Dao Xiao. He had already completed his mission to kill 3 enemy camps. That was why he had retreated. However, he had not seen a single unit return. This could only mean that they had completed their mission beyond their expectations. He hated himself for being too honest and obedient. He wanted to lead his unit out again. However, Xiao Yining took large strides forward and blocked Dao Xiao's warhorse. "No, it is so dark. You might not be able to find them. If every team that returns has to go look for the others, when will that ever end? Listen to my advice. Stay here and observe the situation first before making a decision. Furthermore, the soldiers must be tired and thirsty. Rest and replenish your energy." Even though Xiao Yining was the commander of a division and was leading the Cold Vanguard division, his position was high. However, in front of the Black Knights in Longwei, he was still extremely courteous. He knew that the other party was only inferior to him in terms of rank. In terms of influence, he would never be able to catch up. These words left Dao Xiao speechless. He thought that he could continue to kill, but the soldiers must be tired. He nodded and said, "All right, then let's grab some food. If there is a change in the situation, we will still have to go out." All right. Hurry up and bring the prepared hot food." Seeing that his advice was effective, Xiao Yining couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief and shouted loudly behind him. Not long after Dao Xiao, the leader of the 3rd unit, Qiu Vi, also returned with his men. He was also reeking of blood. Dao Xiao quickly ran over to ask about the results. When he found out that this unit had not only killed 3 but 4 battalions, he stomped his feet in regret. Not long after Qiu Vi returned, the leader of the second unit, Beta Persei, also returned. He had killed 5 battalions. He thought that it was about time, but when he returned, he realized that the young master had not returned. He did not even want to eat and was about to turn around and rush back. However, he was stopped by Xiao Yining. Second brother, even if your body is fine, you still have to consider the condition of the soldiers. You came back later than the other 2 units after killing 5 battalions. I'm sure the 6th young master must have killed more than 5 battalions. Why don't you eat something first and wait and see? That's right, Chou Wu and Dao Xiao said. The starting point of departure was the same, and the speed of return was determined by the number of enemy battalions killed. In this case, it was very likely that the 6th young master would kill his way into the 6th battalion. In this case, the 6th young master's return should not be far away. All right. Beta Persei looked at the dark night. He was also worried that he would not be able to find the young master if he went out now. He would also put his brothers in danger. Therefore he decided to wait a little longer. This wait lasted for an hour. Beta Persei, who felt that a day was like a year, forced himself to drink a bowl of meat soup. Finally he could not wait any longer. No, it's been so long and the young master still hasn't returned. Something must have happened. We can't wait any longer. Yes, we can't wait any longer. This time even Qiu Vi and Dao Xiao could not sit still. According to the time, even if the 6th young master had killed 6 battalions, he should have returned long ago. However, he still had not returned. Could it be that he had killed more enemies? Or did something happen? When they thought of the latter who could still sit still. First, they were the Black Knights, then the Long Wei. They were responsible for ensuring the absolute safety of the 6th young master. In a sense, they were equivalent to the emperor's personal army. Naturally, they were incomparably prestigious. However, this prestige was based on the fact that Yang Qindong was fine. If something really happened, they would not be able to bear the responsibility even if they all died 10 times over. Xiao Yining did not dare to stop them. After an extra hour, he had already lost his confidence. If it was not for the fact that he did not have a warhorse to ride, he would have asked to go out and fight. Men, each unit take out 200 Type 95 weapons and give them to the Black Cavalry. The only thing Xiao Yining could do was to donate the weapons. No matter what, it would be considered a contribution. Chapter 1033. Wait a minute. Just as Xiao Yining issued the task, Beta Persei, who was already on his horse, raised his middle finger and gestured for silence. Then, on the quiet barren mountain, almost everyone heard the sound of horse hooves stomping on the ground. It was getting closer and closer, becoming clearer and clearer. Young master is back. It must be the young master. Beta Persei couldn't help but cry out, his childlike face full of joy. It was Yang Qindong. At this moment, his golden battle robe had long been dyed blood red. When he saw Beta Persei and the others at the foot of the barren mountain from afar, he squeezed out a smile even though he was a little tired. Haha, everyone must be anxious from waiting. This time I violated the military order, it's my responsibility. Yang Qindong had set an example by apologizing as soon as he arrived. With his status, he had to admit that he had done something wrong. He believed that in the future, other officials, no matter how high their ranks were, would have to have an attitude when they did something wrong. Young master, are you okay? But at this moment, no one took his self-reflection seriously. Everyone was really concerned about whether Yang Qindong's body had any problems and whether he was injured. I'm fine. I just killed a little too ruthlessly. 2 of my brothers were injured, but fortunately I checked on them on the way. It's not fatal. They'll be fine after some rest. Yang Qindong grinned and laughed. This was the strength of the Shadow Cavalry. They were covered in protective armor and so were their war horses. Unless they were trapped and died of exhaustion or stripped of their armor, it would be extremely difficult to kill them. This was also the main reason why Yang Qindong dared to split them into 4 teams to counterattack with only 1,000 Shadow Cavalry. Facts also proved that there were no casualties in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th teams. Some were only injured by the shock. When they heard that Yang Qindong was fine and only 2 of his comrades were slightly injured, everyone laughed. Then Beta Persei couldn't help but ask curiously, "Young master, you came back so late. How many enemy camps did you break through?" Faced with this question that everyone was curious about, Yang Qindong didn't answer. Instead, he dismounted from his white dragon warhorse and went to find something to eat and drink. Yang Qindong didn't want to answer and no one dared to ask. However, Badao Jiang and Peng Yu who were following behind him didn't receive such treatment. Beta Persei and the others quickly surrounded them. In the end, the two couldn't stand the interrogation and answered the question. The sixth young master was so focused on killing that he didn't take it seriously even when we reminded him several times. Later, if it wasn't for the fact that the warhorse was carrying too much weight, he probably wouldn't have come back. Badao Jiang said casually, but he still didn't answer the question. For a moment, Beta Persei and the others were angry. They rolled up their sleeves and looked like they were really going to fight. Peng Yu was more reliable. He first smiled and then replied, 8th Battalion. What? 8th Battalion? Hearing this answer, Beta Persei and the others were stunned. Their 3 teams combined had only broken through 12 battalions. The 6th young master's team had broken through 8 battalions. Didn't this mean that he had completed nearly 300% of the mission? And that was the truth. When Yang Qindong saw that the Siamese army was unprepared, he went on a killing spree and broke through battalions one after another. Finally, he reached 8 battalions before returning. With a team of more than 200 people, he had broken through the Siamese army's 8,000 soldiers. Obviously, he had created another miracle. The 5-star army was shocked by Yang Qindong's excitement. Then there were sounds of surprise. The commander of the 5th Division, Xiao Yining, did a rough calculation. The 4 teams together were equivalent to breaking through 20 battalions of the enemy. That was a total of 20,000 soldiers. The Siamese army had suffered such heavy losses and would not be able to recover for a while. So, could his soldiers rest for the night? For this request, Yang Qindong waved his hand and approved it. Take the time to rest. The enemy needs time to prepare. But with such heavy losses, I'm afraid that the attack tomorrow morning will be even fiercer. Rest well for the big battle. Rest well for the big battle. At this moment, all the soldiers of the 5-star army shouted in unison. The morale of the 5-star army was high and the crowd was furious. Tong Si was burning with anger and could not suppress it. When he heard that in just 4 hours they had lost 20 battalions of soldiers, nearly 10,000 dead, countless injured and countless deserters, he could not believe his ears. During the day the 5-star army showed signs of weakness. There were even a few times when his soldiers were at the foot of a barren mountain. Victory was in sight. How could the enemy have the strength to retaliate? General, could it be that the enemy's reinforcements have arrived? You also know that if Yang Qindong is here, the other 5-element armies will definitely rush here like crazy. A deputy general also couldn't figure it out, so he made a guess. *T. I have already arranged countless scouts around the perimeter of the battlefield. Even if there are reinforcements, we should be the first to know. However, there is no news at all. Could it be that their reinforcements didn't come from the ground but from the sky? Tong De shouted angrily. This. The others in the main tent did not say anything. They could not explain this matter. Everything was up to General Tong Si. Tong Si could not figure it out. But his intuition told him that the 5-star army's counterattack was just an arrow at the end of its flight. Otherwise, they would not have stopped at 20 battalions. They would have killed their way to his main tent. In other words, he still had the advantage in numbers. If he wanted to win this battle, he could only continue with this advantage. All of you, go to the battalions immediately and calm the soldiers down. We will launch the attack tomorrow morning. No matter what, we must take Yang Qindong's life this time. Suing City, on top of the city wall. The deputy governor of Cambodia, Din Din Wei, and the Cambodian general, Dagan, were looking towards the southwest. After Yang Qindong left the city, no one dared to attack Suing City. In fact, in order to achieve an absolute advantage in numbers, the Siamese soldiers who were guarding the city were all mobilized. In other words, Suing City was really safe at this moment. Yang Qindong was indeed in danger. The sound of cannons had been heard since the night before. It had been 2 days and 2 nights. Although they were far away and could not see what the 5-star army had been through, the sounds of fighting and killing had not stopped. It was easy to imagine that the 5-star army was not having a good time. Yang Qindong had also been in danger. General Dagan, how many soldiers can we gather in the city? Din Din Wei looked into the distance for a long time and finally could not help but ask. Sai, Deputy Governor, I know what you mean, but we only have about 1,000 soldiers in the city, and half of them are injured. If we rely on them, we can't even defend the city. If we really go out to help, the Siamese soldiers will attack the city at any time. If that's the case, I don't think the 6th young master wants to see. Dagan sighed. As a general, he certainly did not want to watch others fight. but with his current strength there was nothing he could do. These words extinguished Ding Ding Wei's courage that had just arisen. So, we can only watch? No, didn't the sixth young master say that we have enough soldiers in the city? He wants us to prepare enough troops in the city to clean up the battlefield at any time and snatch the supplies that the enemy will leave behind. This is also a very important task. When Dagon said this, he felt a little lacking in confidence. The Siamese soldiers had mobilized more than 100,000 soldiers and reinforcements were still coming. It would be very difficult for Yang Chendong to escape, let alone defeat the enemy. Din Din Wei could hear the disappointment in Dagon's words. He said confidently, "We have to believe in the sixth young master. He is a man who likes to create miracles. Besides, after his arrival our people's lives have been better than before. Compared to His Majesty Boromir, he is more suitable to lead and lead us, isn't he?" Yes, that's right, we need to mobilize now. We need to mobilize the people in the city. We just need to wait for sixth young master to win the battle and capture the captives. This? Dagon originally wanted to ask if this would work. But when he saw how serious Din Din Wei was, he nodded. Then let's go and prepare. 20 miles away from Golden Rim City, a cavalry team was coming. The leader was Major General Jianghu, who usually had a cold face and was serious in speech and manner. After coming ashore from Baji Port, he led the world's #1 cavalry division and traveled day and night without rest. Even when they were eating, they had to eat while riding their horses. Finally, they arrived at Golden Rim City. However, it had been 2 days and 2 nights since the Siamese army besieged the sixth young master. "How far is it from here to Suwing City?" Tianhu asked Lu Duo, who was beside him as he rode forward. "Commander, it is about 400 miles away." Lu Duo had already familiarized himself with the map before coming, so he answered without hesitation. "It is still so far away. No, we are still too slow." Hearing that it would take more than a day, Tianhu shook his head and expressed his dissatisfaction. "It is already very fast. After all, we still have a lot of things with us." Lu Duo explained after listening. The world's #1 cavalry division dominated the beginning city and the North Desert region. They were similar to the roaming cavalry. There was no fixed training ground at all. Often they would fight wherever they went. Especially when they encountered unknown cavalry, they would immediately enter the opportunity to train. Therefore, they usually brought a lot of things such as food and water. It should be known that a large part of the grassland was desert. If there was not enough water, it was easy to get hungry and thirsty, leading to a decline in combat strength. Chapter 1034. There was also the quiver. Compared to an ordinary cavalry that only had a quiver with 50 arrows, the soldiers of the world's #1 cavalry division had 20 quiver with 1,000 arrows. This was because they were used to doing things without supplies, so they had to be self-sufficient. In addition, there were clothes, shoes, hats, bows, extra sabers, and so on. Fortunately, each of them had 2 horses so they could carry such heavy loads. However, this greatly reduced their speed. Now that the sixth young master was in danger, as the closest reinforcements, the #1 cavalry division in the world had to rush over as quickly as possible. Even if they arrived 30 minutes earlier, they might be able to change many things. Leave 200 people in each division and lead the extra horses slowly. The rest of you should speed up. Other than the necessary weapons and rations, leave everything else behind. Our top priority is to rush over with all our might. Tianhu took a deep breath and immediately made a decision. Lu Duo only hesitated for a moment before giving a military salute. Then he began to pass down orders to the messenger behind him. Immediately, the 1st Cavalry Division, which originally had 10,000 people, was left with 800 people. At the same time, they also left behind 10,800 war horses and a bunch of supplies. Without any restraints, Tianhu, who had only brought rations for a day, acted as if he would either succeed or die for a righteous cause. He had already used his actions to tell everyone that they had to rush over to the location to rescue the sixth young master. Otherwise they would run out of food first. The 9,200 cavalry troops advanced quickly. Everywhere they passed, clouds of smoke and dust would rise, giving people the feeling that they were riding on a cloud of dust. On the barren mountain, because of the sneak attack, they managed to obtain half a night to rest. When the sun rose the next day, the crazy attacks began again. As if considering the factor of long delays, Tong Si once again gave an iron order that they could only advance and not retreat. At the same time, the reward for killing Yang Chendong was increased from 10,000 silver taels to 20,000 silver taels. To an ordinary soldier, this was definitely a heaven-shaking sum. It was equivalent to being able to rise from the poor class to the upper class, and not having to worry about food and water for the rest of their lives. This also greatly increased the morale and enticement of the soldiers. Even though they knew that the five-star army possessed extremely miraculous and formidable firearms, the soldiers were still as numerous as the clouds in the sky. Often, after a batch of soldiers was shot down, a new batch would appear immediately. From the looks of it, if the soldiers of the late Qing dynasty had such morale, they wouldn't have allowed the Eight-Nation Alliance to invade. Facing such an attack, 5th Master Lu was also undergoing the harshest test. Their ammunition consumption was too fast, and without enough supplies they were already stretched thin. Of course, the most important thing was that the enemy's charge was too fierce. Many of the muskets had to be used continuously, and the chances of them having problems were greatly increased. For example, misfiring, jamming, or overloading of the musket, causing it to not be able to fire, occurred repeatedly. Originally, 5th Master Lu only had one musket each and did not have many spare muskets. Thus, he had no choice but to pick up a bayonet and go into battle bare-chested. It must be said that the Lung Feng soldiers were not bad with their muskets, and their close combat abilities were also very strong. Once they were back-to-back and formed a 3x3 formation, the three of them could easily kill enemies several times their number. Unfortunately, the number of enemies they faced this time was too much, and it was not just several times their number. After 3 days of battle, the Siamese soldiers had already suffered tens of thousands of casualties, which was a few thousand times the number of casualties of the five-star army. However, when the muskets could no longer display their advantage, the number of casualties began to decrease. At around 10 in the morning, the firearms started to have problems on a large scale. By the time they switched to close combat at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, a total of 3 hours and 3 hours had passed. The number of casualties in the Fifth Army had exceeded 1,000. What was even more frightening was that this number was still increasing. If it wasn't for Yang Qindong bringing the Black Knights and the Dragon Guards to join in and kill the enemy from time to time, the barren mountain might not have been able to be defended. Such a loss had never happened since the establishment of the Lung Feng army. However, no one complained. When they became the glorious soldiers of the Lung Feng army, they were destined to bear the same amount of pressure. For example, in the face of danger, they were expected to face death with equanimity. Use grenades when there are more people and bayonets when there are fewer people. Those who can use muskets, please be prepared to cooperate. Please don't be a hero, don't fight alone, and don't casually save people, 5th Master Lu Division Xiao Yining said as he almost cried. Just now, he didn't know how many heroic soldiers had taken the initiative to charge at the enemy, and then fought one against many hundreds and finally died on the battlefield. He also saw that in order to save these lone heroes, many soldiers had charged into the enemy camp like moths to a flame. After entering, they never came out again. These were all good warriors. Even in the face of death, they did not flinch. He was happy to be their commander, but at the same time he was sad for their sacrifice. However, war was cruel to begin with. Once on the battlefield, one had to be prepared to die on the battlefield. Perhaps this was the fate of some soldiers. However, as a division commander, it was better to have one less person die. It could be said that the Lung Feng army had undergone all kinds of training in the past, including winning with fewer people and bullying with more people. However, they really didn't have much training in using cold weapons to fight with fewer people. Perhaps everyone subconsciously thought that this kind of thing wouldn't happen. Thus, when faced with such a situation, there was some confusion. Division Commander Xiao Yining shouted at the top of his lungs. Under the cooperation of the other commanders, 5th Master Lu Division began to withdraw their forces. At the same time, they also gave up their territory on the outskirts of the barren mountain. Standing on the barren mountain, Yang Qindong didn't stop this from happening. This was because he knew that 5th Master Lu Division wasn't giving up on the battle. Instead, they were welcoming the arrival of a greater victory with a better posture. At 2 in the afternoon, the enemy's large-scale attack began again. From afar, the figures were densely packed. Based on a rough estimate, there were at least 30 to 40,000 soldiers. They relied on their numbers and shouted as they charged forward. In the face of the locust-like enemy, the remaining 6,000 soldiers of the 5th Division were not afraid at all. First, they threw out the last grenades in their hands, forcefully blasting a hole in the enemy's formation. Then they began a frenzied counterattack. With companies as units, they stabbed forward like many sharp knives, forcefully suppressing the enemy's advance. Get on your horses and attack. Seeing this scene, Yang Qindong knew that it was time for him to counterattack. He immediately leaped onto the white dragon horse and rushed out in a blood-red battle robe. Beside him and behind him were 1,000 black knights and dragon guards. They also raised their steel swords and rushed towards the enemy while shouting and yelling. Facing the densely packed enemy, the cavalry's charging force was limited. If they were caught in the crossfire, they would become the target of public criticism. There would be no possibility of retreat or even survival. But at this moment, no one showed any intention of retreating. To be a member of the Black Cavalry, one had to be extremely loyal. They usually enjoyed the respect of others, and now, it was time for them to pay the same price. 1,000 Black Cavalry dragon guards charged into the enemy's camp. First, they killed their way into the enemy's camp. Then they were scattered and surrounded. Finally, their armor was riddled with holes. The so-called invulnerable black armor had served its purpose. It could no longer protect the Black Cavalry dragon guards, and they became the targets of the Siamese soldiers. The sun gradually set in the west and the sky finally turned dark again. Translator, Nyoibo Studio Editor. Nyoibo Studio. The arrival of night hindered the Siamese army's attack. Yang Qindong and his men could finally take a breather. When they returned to the barren hills and were panting, new casualties were reported. 5th Master Lu Division had less than 4,000 soldiers left. Even the Black Cavalry had less than 800 men left. Even the Black Cavalry had lost more than 200 men. This showed the cruelty of the battle. Their deaths will not be in vain. Their deaths laid the foundation for our greater victory. Their deaths were worthy, and honorable. Yang Qindong said and did so at the same time. He requested for a list of all the soldiers who died in the battle to be given to him. All of them would be treated as martyrs so that their families and loved ones would be taken care of. To paraphrase Yang Qindong's words, we cannot let the heroes bleed and shed tears. We cannot let their souls not rest in peace. We must let them pass away peacefully without any worries or scruples. Long live the 6th young master. More than 4,000 soldiers knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Yang Qindong, to the god in their hearts. Morale was still high. Many soldiers showed an attitude of facing death as they waited for the next bloody battle to come. At that time they might fall and never get up again. But they had nothing to regret. This was their fate. There was nothing to worry about because everything had been arranged for them by the 6th young master. The soldiers were not afraid of death, but some were afraid of Yang Qindong's death. Xiao Yining and Beta Persei walked up to Yang Qindong together and made a request with a serious expression. In the next battle they would try their best to charge and kill their way out of the encirclement. Break out? That's impossible. After understanding the meaning of the two, Yang Qindong shook his head with a bitter smile. If he knew that Yang Qindong would have such an attitude, Xiao Yining would not have cared about his status and said firmly, 6th young master, we are not asking for your opinion. We are informing you of this decision. Are you going to force me out? Yang Qindong saw that Xiao Yining was serious, so he pretended to be angry and his face darkened. Chapter 1035. Don't blame Commander Xiao, this is also the opinion of all of us in Long Wei. Our duty is to protect your absolute safety. Now that there is danger, the young master must leave. There is no room for discussion. Beta Persei spoke up. He who had always followed Yang Qindong's lead, finally became the bad guy for once and offered his opinion. Since Beta Persei had made such a statement, Yang Qindong knew that it would be difficult to refuse. A thought came to his mind and he asked, since we are breaking out of the encirclement, where should we go? Now that Wang Shan is also injured and the radio is damaged, we don't know where our troops are and where the danger is. Once we rush out, what should we do if we get surrounded again? At that time, our reinforcements won't even know where we are. What should they do then? Won't it be even more dangerous? When the battle was at its cruelest, the telegrapher Wang Shan also joined the battle. However, because his strength was limited, he was killed and carried back. Not only that, but the radio was also damaged and could not be used for a while. Yang Qindong could naturally solve all of this. For example, he could take out another radio from the warehouse and then send a report to the outside to inquire about the situation. However, he did not do so. He also wanted to see what the other armies would choose to do when they did not hear from him. This was often the best time to test people's hearts. He did not expect that this method of testing others would become an excuse. It was an excellent excuse to not be forced to break out of the encirclement. Beta Persei and Xiao Yining only thought about how to ensure Yang Qindong's safety and did not think about what to do after they got out. Now that they were asked this question, they did not know what to say. However, Yang Qindong still had a relaxed smile on his face and said, Well, you have to believe in yourselves and our army. I promise that as long as we can hold on, the reinforcements will arrive by tomorrow at the latest. At that time, it will be time for us to fight back with all our strength. The reinforcements will arrive tomorrow? Beta Persei and Xiao Yining looked shocked. At the same time, they also had a question to ask. How did Yang Qindong find out about the radio station without it? However, they wouldn't say anything like that, nor did they dare to say anything. Yes, the reinforcements will arrive tomorrow. Yang Qindong said as if there was something important. Of course, he wouldn't say that he was just guessing. In fact, he didn't know where the reinforcements were. Everything was just a guess. He just wanted to cheer everyone up so that they wouldn't lose hope. If the reinforcements did not arrive the next day, that would be easy too. They could just push it back by one day. After all, the effect of the pep talk would take effect. Others did not know that this was all a guess. Looking at Yang Qindong's confident demeanor, Beta Persei and Xiao Yining retreated with joy. Then the news that reinforcements would arrive after a day of defending spread, and morale rose again. Tong Si did not know when the reinforcements from the 5-star army would arrive. However, he had a feeling that they were not far away. It had been more than 10 days since the attack on Suwing City and the Barren Mountain. The 5-star army should have made their move by now. If he couldn't take down Yang Qindong, he was afraid that he would lose this great opportunity. Not only that, he might fall into a passive position. The number of 5-star army in the Barren Mountain had been determined. There were less than 10,000 people. However, he had led hundreds of thousands of troops to fight for many days. So far, the number of dead and injured had reached 70 to 80,000, but they still hadn't been taken down. A 5-star army of nearly 10,000 people was already so powerful. What if another one came? He didn't dare to think about what the consequences would be. Pass down the order. Have a good rest tonight and attack with all your strength tomorrow morning. No matter what, we must take down Yang Qindong. Also, all the battalions must be prepared for a sneak attack. Once the enemy comes, they won't be able to return. Tong Si didn't choose to attack at night. He was worried that once the 5-star army broke through in the dark, their vision would be affected. In order to not let Yang Qindong escape, he had to make the decision to let the enemy rest for another night. Yang Qindong, who was at the foot of the Barren Mountain, didn't know that the Siamese soldiers wouldn't attack tonight. Late into the night, there was still no movement from the enemy. Yang Qindong finally said, "Did you see that? The enemy has already expected us to break through, so they didn't choose to attack at night. Okay, now everyone can have a good rest." Beta Persei and Xiao Yining both had bitter expressions. They knew that if they broke through during the day, the danger would be greater. After all, the Barren Mountain had been completely surrounded. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that not even a bird could fly out. Even so, they could only place their hopes on the reinforcements that would arrive tomorrow. Will there really be reinforcements? Who will they be? This question appeared in the hearts of many people, but no one asked because it was tantamount to questioning the 6th young master's words. This was a political issue. Yang Qindong leaned against a boulder and slept for the night. In his dream, he saw his wives and little Lele. He saw little Lele happily hugging his neck and kissing him on the cheek. He also saw First Madame Hu Yen, who was already pregnant. When he carefully leaned his head over, he first heard the faint sound of the baby breathing. Then it became louder and louder until it became a very loud dong 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 trembling sound. It seemed that at this moment the earth was trembling with it. Young master, young master." While he was in a daze, Beta Persei's voice suddenly sounded and then his body shook. Yang Qindong instinctively opened his eyes, and Beta Persei's wide-eyed face appeared in his line of sight. Seeing that Yang Qindong had woken up, Beta Persei said happily, "Young master, you're really amazing. The reinforcements are here, the reinforcements are here." The reinforcements are here? Yang Qindong was also shocked by this news, and when he wanted to say something, the sound of armored horses trampling on the ground entered his ears. He finally knew where the sound in his dream came from. It was precisely because of this that Yang Qindong's eyes widened. How many reinforcements are here? Which team is it? I don't know yet and I can't see clearly, but it should be the reinforcements. Young master, look, the Siamese army that was about to attack has become chaotic. Beta Persei pointed to the distance at the foot of the Barren Mountain and said reasonably. Binoculars. Yang Qindong said as he took the binoculars from Chiu Vi, the captain of the First Guard Company, and looked at them. Haha, the reinforcements are here and they seem to be very strong. In this case, immediately inform the entire army to prepare for a full counterattack. We need to attack from the center and attack from both sides. Looking through the binoculars, Yang Qindong saw the commotion in the enemy camp, and at this moment he was extremely excited. He did not think that the Siamese army still needed to put on such a show at this time. Faced with only half the number of people, and his condition was not very good, they could attack with just a burst of energy. It was meaningless to put on such a show now. In fact, the reinforcements were indeed here, and it was the 1st Cavalry Division that had arrived. After removing all the burden, Tian, who led the main force of the 1st Cavalry Division, 9,200 people, and traveled more than 400 miles in one day and one night, arriving at the barren mountain outside Suwing City. Seeing that the sky was about to brighten, Tian, who gave everyone an hour to rest, and then said to the 5 regimental commanders, "If there are no major changes, the 6th young master is on the barren mountain in the distance. This battle will be the time for the 1st Cavalry Division to show the strongest combat power. I hope everyone can do their best because all the 5-star army is watching us, because the 6th young master is on the barren mountain watching us. Is everyone confident?" It was only one day and one night of continuous travel. This was not the first time for the 1st Cavalry Division under the heavens. There was even a time when they traveled continuously for more than 3 days and 3 nights, but when faced with an enemy they still did not rest and won in a spurt of energy. This time they were going to help the 6th young master, so there was no possibility of them backing down. It was mentioned before that the first 3 regimental commanders of the 1st Cavalry Division were all captives. To be able to hold such a high position, it was all because of Yang Qindong's magnanimity. Even if it was to repay his kindness, everyone had to perform well this time. In other words, even without Tianhu's words, they would still do their best to perform. There are too many enemies, don't split up. Later, all of you will gather in a fan-shaped charge. At the same time, pay close attention to the position of the enemy's commander. If you find anything, immediately notify us. Tianhu knew the principle of capturing the leader first to capture the bandits. Yes. The 5 regimental commanders agreed without hesitation. Then they turned around to notify the other regimental commanders, and at the same time replenished their food supplies. At this moment all the food they brought was swallowed. They knew very well that they did not know when the next battle would end, and they did not know when their next meal would be. Now they were all prepared to not return until they won. Half an hour later, the 9,200 cavalrymen were ready to charge. Under the command of their division commander, Tianhu, they suddenly appeared and charged diagonally into the battlefield, charging towards the unprepared Siamese infantry. In history there was a saying that the Jurchens were invincible. However, when they faced the 1st Cavalry Division, when they appeared and launched a frenzied attack, the Siamese soldiers were stunned by the cavalry that appeared out of nowhere. In the past few days the number of 5-star army soldiers on the barren hills had decreased, but they had also paid a heavy price for it. In the face of the most advanced continuous fire rifles, the others were afraid that they wouldn't be able to avoid them. However, under General Tong's orders and the threat of the inspectors, they had no choice but to use their bodies to block the bullet holes. This made them very puzzled and angry. Now that the 5-star army cavalry had appeared behind them, the first thing they charged at was the Inspector Brigade, which gave them hope of escaping. Chapter 1036. Although the reward was high, one had to be alive to claim it. After witnessing the power of the 5-star army, the desire to claim the reward faded. It was only because they had no other choice but to make this choice. Now that they had a chance to save their lives, the Siamese soldiers, who were already demoralized, turned their swords around and ran away. Yes, they ran. Faced with the sudden appearance of the world's number 1 cavalry division, most of the Siamese soldiers did not even have the courage to fight. They only knew that the only way to survive had been opened. All they needed to do now was to follow the flow and escape with their lives. With such a mindset and such a general trend, the number 1 cavalry division in the world didn't encounter any resistance at all. There were even many places where the enemy retreated like the tide before they even arrived. The speed at which these people fled was actually not much slower than their war horses. What should we do? The 4th Regiment commander, Bai Shuang, was riding beside Tianhu. How about this, Regiment Commander Bai? You lead your men to the barren mountains and report our plan to the 6th young master. I will lead the others to continue the pursuit and try to kill the enemy's general. Tianhu hesitated for a moment before he spoke. Okay, I will do it now. 4th Regiment, come with me. Bai Shuang nodded and left with the order. Leaving Tianhu behind, Bai Shuang led the rest of the cavalry and continued to charge forward. During the process they kept waving their swords and killing the enemy. Blood and broken limbs were scattered all over the place. On the barren mountain, Bai Shuang arrived with 1,900 cavalrymen. From afar he saw Yang Qindong riding on a white dragon waiting for the battle. Immediately he leaped off his horse and ran a few steps towards Yang Qindong. "Student Bai Shuang is late. Sorry for startling you." Bai Shuang was once a student of Yang Qindong's academy. He was not personally taught by Yang Qindong, so he could not be called a teacher. However, it was not wrong to call him Dean. "Haha, it's Regiment Commander Bai. Has the world's first division arrived?" After seeing White Shuang, the last trace of suspicion that the Siamese soldiers were putting on an act disappeared. The world's first cavalry division would never cooperate with the enemy to put on a show. Headmaster Teacher Tian is leading the main force of the army to kill the enemy. He has sent a student to protect the headmaster. Bai Shuang's voice rang out again. "Good, you guys are very good. I'm very pleased that you're fast enough. However, you've already killed your way out, so how can I just watch from the sidelines? Men, follow the young master and charge out. Beta Persei, fire the red signal flare. It's time to inform Ding Ding Wei and General De En Ha." Finally, the reinforcements had arrived. Now it was time for him to shed his blood. At this moment, Yang Qindong felt his entire body brimming with energy. A red signal flare immediately rose into the air, causing Ding Ding Wei and En, who were waiting for news on the tower, to see it. Immediately, the 20,000 corpse-collecting soldiers in the city opened the city gate and rushed toward the battlefield. At the same time, on top of the barren hill, except for the 500 who were too seriously injured to move, more than 4,000 people rushed out and cooperated with Commander Bai Shuang. This group of more than 6,000 people headed towards the Siamese camp from another direction. In the main tent of the Siamese army, Tong Si was still anxiously waiting for the arrival of good news. However, what he received was not news of the barren mountain being conquered or Yang Qindong being captured. Instead, he received news of the arrival of the 5-star Army's reinforcements. As soon as they appeared, they defeated the main force of the Siamese army and were now heading toward the main tent. "What's going on? What's going on? How can the reinforcements of the 5-star army arrive so quickly?" Tong Si shouted hysterically. At this moment, it was obvious that he did not want to believe that all of this was true. However, the truth was the truth. It would not be false just because one did not want to believe it. After a few captains rushed into the main tent to report the battle situation, Tong Si finally knew that this time they had really lost. Not only did he lose the opportunity to capture Yang Qindong, but it was also very likely that he would be defeated because of this. If he had escaped a little slower, his life would have been in danger. Retreat. In desperation, Tong Si had no choice but to issue such a military order. What Tong Si did not know was that the generals below him were already afraid of the 5-star army. According to them, the 5-star army's reinforcements numbered in the tens of thousands. Therefore, it was impossible for them to defeat them. Otherwise, with Tong Si's 60,000 soldiers, it was completely possible for him to compete with the 1st Cavalry Division. Once an army lost its fighting spirit, it was no better than an organized group of civilians. When the order to retreat was given, the camp immediately became chaotic. Everyone fought to leave, and all the generals asked the ration officer for food. Food had to be eaten mouthful by mouthful, roads had to be taken step by step, and tasks had to be done one by one. When faced with so many generals asking for food, the ration officer was confused. When he strongly urged everyone to line up and distribute the food, saying that it would take at least 1 to 3 days to complete, the generals could not accept it. Some of them even started to fight for the food. Before they met the enemy, the Siamese army was already in a mess. It was a pity that Tong Si had already retreated, so he didn't have the ability to distribute or preside over the overall situation. When the 1st Heavenly Cavalry Division arrived at the main camp, all they saw was a mountain of rations that had yet to be distributed. "Leave 200 men to guard the granary. The rest of you follow me to kill the enemy." After unexpectedly obtaining these rations, Tian, who didn't show much joy on his face. His target was the enemy's commander, Tong Si. As long as he captured this person, this battle would be considered complete in his eyes. The 1st Cavalry Division continued their pursuit. Along the way, all the enemies they encountered surrendered. Very few people had the courage to fight. As a result, the entire battlefield was filled with scenes of the Siamese soldiers surrendering. Fortunately, Ding Ding Wei and De En arrived quickly and took over the job, preventing the situation from becoming even more chaotic. From this point alone, it was clear that Yang Qindong had foresight. It seemed that he had expected this scene a few days ago. While Tian, who was advancing bravely, Yang Qindong arrived at the battlefield with more than 6,000 soldiers. Without the supervision of the Inspector Brigade, the Siamese soldiers who had been charging ferociously were now in a state of disarray. They were no longer as brave as before. Instead, they knelt down and threw down their weapons to surrender. Faced with these people who were no longer resisting, Yang Qindong did not give the order to kill them. Instead, he put away their weapons and sent people to watch over them. This was a job that could allow him to take in many captives. This greatly slowed down his progress and caused him to lose sight of Tong Si's fleeing figure. The 1st Cavalry Division also encountered the same problem. There were too many Siamese soldiers surrendering along the way. If these people were not controlled, who knew if they would escape back to Siam and become soldiers again? "Commander, what should we do?" 1st Regiment Commander Taimu looked at the ground full of captives and asked worriedly. "Stop the pursuit and clean up the battlefield." Although he was hesitant, Tian Hu finally gave the order. He could not ignore the tens of thousands of captives in front of him. If these people caused any disasters, he would become a sinner. Tong Si never expected that the ferocious 5-star army would have to give up the pursuit due to the large number of captives. This allowed him to successfully escape from Cambodia and return to Siam. It was said that along the way he encountered nearly 100,000 Siamese soldiers who rushed to reinforce him. They were all persuaded to return. Tong escaped, but even more soldiers were forced to surrender because they didn't have war horses. In order to preserve their lives, they were forced to surrender. According to the statistics after the battle, there were more than 50,000 captives in this battle. There were also countless military supplies and provisions. The battle to defend Suwon City and the danger of being surrounded by barren hills was finally resolved. It seemed like they had effectively blocked the attack of the Siamese army and the 5-star army had turned the tables. However, in Yang Qindong's view, this was far from the end. This was just the beginning. In front of the city gates of Suwon City, there were corpses covered in white cloth. A total of 4,854 soldiers of the 5th Division and the Black Knights had died. At this moment they were all lying here. Many of them could not be found for various reasons. The only things that were covered were the items they used daily. Revenge, revenge, revenge. The entire city gate was filled with shouts. They were all soldiers of the 5th Division. This time they had lost half of their division and were almost crippled. Everyone was suppressing the anger in their hearts. There were less than 800 Black Knights and Dragon Guards left. They stood to the left and right of Yang Qindong. None of them made a sound, but from their eyes, which revealed their armor, they were filled with intense killing intent. It was obvious that they were also extremely sad at this moment. "Good, then we will take revenge. Men, bring the prisoners here," Yang Qindong said in accordance with the soldier's voice. After the order was given, 4,854 Siamese soldiers walked out under the escort of the 1st Cavalry Division. These people were all prisoners of war, and they were the kind that did not admit defeat. Even in the prison camp, they were still shouting about their identity as Siamese soldiers. They were still shouting that one day when they returned to the army, they would come back to Cambodia and teach the 5-star army a lesson. Yang Qindong didn't have time to do their ideological work. He didn't even mention the matter of re-education through labor. It just so happened that a large memorial service was going to be held for the dead comrades. These people were put to use. They were tied up with ropes one by one and brought out like sugar-coated haws. There were nearly 50,000 Siamese prisoners outside the city. There were hundreds of thousands of people in Suwon City who watched this scene. They watched as the 4,854 prisoners of war were brought out. They watched as Beta Persei used his naturally loud voice to recite the names of the dead comrades. Chapter 1037. There were nearly 5,000 names, and it would take some time to recite all of them. Even though Yang Er's speed was not slow, it still took him 4 hours. During this time, there was no other sound outside the city except for the sound of the wind. Everyone was listening attentively, as if every name that was called out was imprinted in their hearts. When the last name was read out in front of everyone, Yang Qindong raised his right hand and said loudly, "Invading without a reason, a life for a life. Today these people are sentenced to death and will be executed immediately. Guards kill. Kill." More than 4,000 soldiers of the 5th Division shouted in unison. Kill. Nearly 800 Black Cavalry soldiers shouted in unison. Kill. 10,000 soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division shouted in unison. Kill. More than 200,000 people on the city gate tower shouted in unison. The The sound of killing shook the heavens, and nearly 50,000 Siamese prisoners trembled in fear. Some of the more timid ones could no longer stand and fell to the ground. Under the sound of killing, 454 Siamese soldiers were executed. Their mouths were gagged in advance, so when they died they did not make a single sound. No one knew if they had admitted their mistake at this moment, or if they wanted to continue cursing. But these were no longer important. What was important was that they were dead and could no longer pose any threat to the five-star army. Since ancient times, many people had said that killing prisoners of war was an ominous thing. But this time, when Yang Qindong ordered the prisoners to be killed, no one made a different sound. Firstly, they were not prisoners at all. They were just enemies who had temporarily lost their ability to fight. Secondly, the souls of the 5th Division, especially the Black Cavalry, had to be avenged. These people should have died on the battlefield long ago. It was not a bad thing to make use of them. The machete fell and 4,054 heads fell to the ground. Nearly 50,000 Siamese prisoners had completely lost their will to fight. At this moment they suddenly understood how precious life was and how lucky they were. With the deaths of these people, the five-star army became even more famous. Everyone saw the attitude of the five-star army towards the dead. It was said that not only the direct troops of the five-star army, but also the Cambodian soldiers who died in the battle and the civilians of Suwon City who participated in the resistance against the enemy received a handsome pension. It was said that Bugnam of Gojoseon had promised that the families of these martyrs would be given jobs. In other words, he was not only responsible for the dead but also for the living. As soon as the news came out, the number of people who signed up to join the army in Cambodia increased by several times. Many young men were still complaining that the appearance of the five-star army had broken the peace of their lives. However, when they saw the attitude of Yang Qindong towards the civilians of Suwon City, their mentality changed. They realized that Bugnam of Gojoseon really treated them as his own people. He was really working hard for them to have a better life in the future. On top of this, there was only one more condition, which was to respect the Han people. So what? When did ordinary people have the final say? When did they ever enjoy real freedom? There was only one more Han Chinese above them. As long as they acknowledged this point, they would be able to live a better life and obtain more freedom. So why not? No one liked being born inferior. However, when the general trend was like this, there was nothing they could do to change it. In such an environment, being a soldier to defend the country could give them a new hope. They even had the opportunity to raise their status and bring glory to their ancestors. So, what reason did they have not to do it? In fact, as early as the moment the Phnom Penh dynasty became the province of Cambodia, some policies about Wuxia had been spread. However, most people did not believe it. Today Yang Qindong used facts to teach everyone a lesson. This kind of doubtful thoughts finally disappeared, allowing more people to see the difference between the five-star army and making more people envious. There were also more people who launched practical actions and began to sign up for enlistment. Ding Ding Wei and En told the good news to Yang Qindong. Then they looked forward to it. They were happy about the change in the people's views. Although they were former officials of the Phnom Penh dynasty, they could still see who treated the people better. Yang Qindong really wanted to let the people under his rule live a happier life. With this, they should support him. The reason why they looked forward to it was because they were worried that Yang Qindong would not allow these ambitious young people to join the army. After all, the five-star army paid attention to the elite route. It had always been the quality of the soldiers rather than the quantity. It was also possible to refuse these people to join the army. However, this would greatly reduce their enthusiasm, which would increase the difficulty of managing them in the future. Under their expectant gazes, Yang Qindong pondered for a moment before giving his answer. Since they are so hot-blooded, how can we hurt their hearts? Then let's arrange for an assessment. If the conditions permit, and if there are no problems with identity and background, they can join the army. Yang Qindong actually agreed, which naturally made Ding Ding Wei and En happy. But then there was another problem. En quickly said, "Sixth young master, this time there are many people who signed up for the army. Not only Suwon City, but many young people of the right age in many towns nearby. If they pass the assessment and political review, can they all join the army?" Of course. Yang Qindong did not understand what En meant. On the other hand, Ding Ding Wei quickly said, "Sixth young master, it's like this. This time there are a lot of people and there should be a lot of people who pass the assessment. If they all join the army, then the military strength of Cambodia will naturally increase by several times, so the financial pressure will naturally be great. It doesn't matter. As long as they are physically qualified and willing, we can accept them. But we have to explain to them in advance that Cambodia alone does not need so many soldiers. They will have a new place to go in the future. As long as we are prepared, we can accept as many as we want. In this battle, Yang Qindong saw the drawbacks of insufficient military strength. Although he had this feeling before, with the elite route, even if the enemy had a large number of soldiers, what could they do? They would still be defeated by him. But this time, in the face of the sudden attack of the Siamese army, the lack of military strength was finally revealed. Yang Qindong finally understood that sometimes, it was not enough to have a good number of soldiers. It was the truth that ants could kill an elephant. A small country like Siam gave him so much pressure. If he wanted to conquer the West in the future and occupy a larger area of land, how could he do it without enough military strength? If that was the case, he would just recruit soldiers. Other forces could support so many soldiers, so how could Yang Xia not be able to do it? Out of consideration for the future, Yang Qindong agreed to the expansion of the military. Not only that, but he also sent a message to several other provinces. He knew very well that it wouldn't take long for the news of Cambodia province's recruitment to spread out. By then, the men from other provinces would inevitably ask for such a request. Instead of waiting for them to ask for instructions, it was better to just let it go. He wanted to see how many soldiers he could gather with his forces. Just like that, the matter of conscription was settled. As usual, he only sent a telegram to the Crimson City Lord Manor and the military to state the facts. This clearly showed his attitude. I'm only informing you, not asking for your opinion. Just do as you're told. The recruitment was handed over to Ding Ding Wei and Dagan, who were familiar with the local environment. In Suing City, Yang Qindong received Lu Zhua, the commander of the new 1st Cavalry Division, who had just arrived. Yang Qindong did not have to be polite to this old subordinate. After learning that Lu Zhua's condition was stable and there were no symptoms of acclimatization, he said, "Since there is no problem with the army, then go and prepare. We will set off in 2 days. It is time to seek justice from Siam." The king of Siam was in Bangkok. General Tong had already fled in defeat. However, he had already lost his freedom the moment he entered the royal capital. He was captured by the king's guards who had been waiting here for a long time and locked up in prison. This time Siam King Ili Chi believed Tong's words. He sent an army to reinforce the eastern front. He even sent out the few cannons he had. However, in the end he did not manage to capture Yang Qindong, but the news of the army's defeat. Since the matter had failed, someone had to take responsibility for it. Tong naturally became the culprit. For this matter, Yi Liqui found Prime Minister Hammond and personally announced his decision to behead Tong Si. According to him, if a general lost a battle, he had to be punished, especially when the 5-star army's counterattack was imminent. If he did not deal with Tong, the other generals would not do their best. In the end, they would lose the battle and flee back to the capital. Hamad had a different view on the king's order. From his point of view, when the two armies were at war, it was not auspicious to kill one's general. It would only disappoint the other generals. But since it was the king's order, he had to obey. Therefore, he arranged for someone to go to the dungeon and announce that Tong would be locked up and executed after the battle. From his point of view, since it had to be done, it was best to delay it as much as possible and not let the bad news spread. Tong, who was only one step away from success, was locked up in the dungeon and waiting to be executed after the battle. If he had known this would happen, it would be hard to say if he would have escaped back to the royal city. What Tong didn't expect was that even though he was about to die, the 5-star army didn't let him off. He fainted after consuming a meal, and when he opened his eyes, he was already out of the dungeon. He couldn't believe that someone would spend a huge sum of money to buy him out of the dungeon. Chapter 1038. The person said that he was General Tong's family, and they were willing to exchange him for someone of similar stature. He was just a dying man. When the prison guard saw the large amount of gold and silver, he handed him over without much thought. After all, he was going to die anyway, so no one would pay attention to him. However, they did not know that this was the beginning of the disaster for Siam. Everything started with Yang Qindong's telegram reprimanding the intelligence department. The Siamese army split into 2 groups and marched towards Cambodia to intimidate Laos. The 5-star army actually didn't notice such an important military intelligence. It was no wonder that Yang Qindong scolded Yang San in the telegram for being useless. If he couldn't do it, then he should find someone capable to do it. Feeling Yang Qindong's anger, Yang San sent a secret telegram to Golden Rooster, who was in charge of the situation in Southeast Asia. However, this telegram was like a stone thrown into the sea. Helplessly, they had to send someone to investigate. Finally, they received news that Wu Gue, who was temporarily in charge of Sky Sparrow, had been captured by the Siamese army. He was nicknamed Golden Rooster, and his real name was Wu Gue. Just like the Great Ming Dynasty had the Genie Guards and the East Faction Guards, and the Five-Star Army had the Ministry of State Security and the CIA, Siam also had its own intelligence organization, and they had found Wu Gui's location in advance. It was in an inconspicuous courtyard in Bangkok. Siam beat them at their own game. They did not take him down immediately. Instead, under the instructions of Prime Minister Hamad, they only watched him and did not alert the enemy. When the Siam army was preparing for war, Wu Gue, nicknamed Golden Rooster, was gathering his subordinates for a meeting. The Siam army broke in and captured him. They killed 7 members of the intelligence department on the spot, including Golden Rooster. Because the matter was done secretly, and the key members of the intelligence department who knew about Golden Rooster's whereabouts were either dead or captured, the security department did not know about this at all. It was not until Yang Qindong's telegram that they could not contact him that they sent someone to investigate. Only then did they know everything. The intelligence network of the Ministry of State Security in Siam was wiped out. When the news reached Chichen City, 5th Madame Su Maner, who was in charge of the CIA, felt that her opportunity had arrived. Since the establishment of the CIA, although it had done some things, its contributions were not very great. The reason was that the intelligence network of the Security Bureau had been established long ago. At this time, it was not easy for the CIA to insert a rod into it. Not only did they have to face the obstruction of enemy intelligence departments, but they also had to be suppressed by the Ministry of State Security. That's right, it was true that Su Maner was Yang Qindong's 5th madam, but Yang San was a servant who had followed Yang Qindong for many years. He was extremely trusted and valued. When it came to intelligence, he was naturally unwilling to give in. For the sake of the 5th madam, he had already shown enough respect by not directly suppressing the CIA. It was very difficult for the CIA, which was established late and had lost the initiative, to gain any achievements. As the person behind the scenes, Su Maner had been looking for an opportunity to make a breakthrough. Finally, the opportunity had come. The incident in Siam made her feel that there was an opportunity to take advantage of. Immediately, she sent out a very clean female intelligence member, nicknamed Qingxi, to secretly go to the capital of Siam. According to Su Maner's intention, Qingxi's arrival was to investigate more of the Siam army's movements, as well as whether or not she could analyze their next move. After Qingxi arrived, she learned that General Tong had returned to the capital through buying information with a large sum of money. As such, she immediately bribed someone to be a spy in the prison, wanting to keep an eye on this General Tong. Qingxi had a feeling that the 6th young master would not spare this person. Then, his every move had to be carefully monitored. What she did not expect was that the king of Siam was so decisive and actually gave the order to execute him after the war. Since there was no chance to kill this person on the battlefield, Qingxi had the idea that she could not let him go. Thus, she spent a large sum of money to exchange him in the name of Tong's family. After taking down Tong in this way, Qingxi reported the matter. In her opinion, it was just a trivial matter. However, she did not expect that this telegram would be sent to Yang Qindong. The original intention was for Su Maner to ask how she wanted to punish the culprit. In Yang Qindong's eyes, his eyes could not help but light up. You must hide him well. If it is not safe, kill him on the spot. In short, do not leave any traces behind. Try your best to deny this matter to the outside world. I have great use for it. After sending this telegram, Yang Qindong immediately sent another telegram to Luo Pe, the commander of the 2nd Army, who had already made preparations to send out troops in Wanxiang City. He allowed him to send out troops to Siam and reminded him that all logistical matters could be handled by the governor of Lao Province, Luan Shaoqian. After sending out these 2 telegrams, Yang Qindong's 3rd telegram was also sent out. It was sent to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Chichen City, Ma Dali. He requested to send people to Siam as soon as possible to negotiate. After sending out the telegram, Yang Qindong waved his hand and sent out troops to Siam. He had the 1st Cavalry Division, the 1st Cavalry Division of the New Army, half of the 5th Division of the Lu Army, and a total of 50,000 Cambodian soldiers, temporarily recruited. In total, he had more than 70,000 people. It was quite a powerful force. Next, it was time for him to seek justice. Wanxiang City. After receiving the telegram, the commander of the 2nd Army, Luo Pe, took the initiative to look for Luan Shaoqian and Long Tainan. He said that he would immediately send out troops according to the sixth young master's orders and ask them to help and cooperate with him. Whether it was Luan Xiaoqun or Long Tainan, they were both relatives of Yang Qindong. In addition, one of them was the leader of Laos, while the other was in charge of the stability of the public security under Yang Qindong's influence. Both of them were very powerful. Even though Luo Po was already a major general, he still showed a lot of respect when he saw them. "Commander Luo, don't worry. Lao province will definitely listen to the orders of the sixth young master. We will fully support you. If you want money, we will give you money. If you want things, we will give you things." This was Luan Xiaoqun's declaration. Then came Long Tianan's voice. "Commander Luo, don't worry. I have already discussed with General He Guang. We will try our best to keep up with your pace. During this period, we have recruited a total of 40,000 soldiers. We will fully support you." After more than 10 days, while the situation in Suwing City was worrying, Luan Xiaoqun and Long Tainan did not stay idle. After they reached a common goal, they did something very bold without being able to contact Yang Qindong. That was to recruit soldiers on the spot, especially the police force. Under Long Tianan's request, many people joined the army and became members of the Lao army. This allowed the army to expand in a short period of time and reached a total of 40,000 people. It was also proven that their thoughts were the same as Yang Qindong's. As expected, Cambodia province started to expand the army. However, Lao province's actions were done before this order. Because of this, Luan Xiaoqun and Long Tainan jointly signed a telegram to Yang Qindong to ask for forgiveness. Not only was military power important, it was also very sensitive. It was like a double-edged sword. If used well, it could be used to kill the enemy. If not, it would hurt oneself. Knowing this, the two of them had to show some attitude. Of course, Yang Qindong also had to show some attitude. He ended the telegram by telling them not to do it again. This was also a reminder to some people that privately recruiting and dispatching troops was not allowed. This warning was a warning that it would not happen again. After receiving support, Commander Luo Po finally let loose. Other than the 7th Division who remained in Vietnam to stabilize the situation, the 2nd Division and the 6th Division moved out. They suddenly left Wanxiang City and charged towards the Siamese camp outside the city. Following behind these two divisions were the 40,000 newly recruited Lao army soldiers. They were made up of young and strong Lao army soldiers who had yet to get used to each other. At this point, the North, South and East 5-star armies started to retaliate against Siam. On the north was the 2nd and 6th divisions led by Luo Po, as well as the 40,000 Lao soldiers, a total of 67,000 men. On the east was the 1st Cavalry Division led by Yang Qindong, the 1st Cavalry Division of the new 1st Army, half of the 5th Division and 50,000 Cambodian soldiers, a total of 74,000 men. On the south was the 1st and 2nd Divisions of the 1st and 2nd Divisions of the 1st C Division. They had a total of 17,000 soldiers. Among them, C's 2nd Division Zhao Changchao had already captured Pearl Island, later known as Phuket Island, cutting off Siam's southern road by land. After C's 1st Division occupied Samui Island, they used the water to enter the land and surrounded Pattaya, later known as Tabaya, which was southeast of Bangkok, forming complete control over the entire southern sea of Siam. When the North Army left Wanxiang City, they caught the Siam Army off guard. Over the past few days, the Siam Army had gotten used to the 5-star Army's defense and did not expect them to suddenly attack. The 20,000 unprepared Siam Army was crippled by the 2nd and 6th Divisions of the Lu Army. Amidst the sounds of gunfire, they were defeated. In less than an hour, they left behind 3,000 corpses and fled. Luo Pajuan left the task of cleaning up the battlefield to the 40,000 Lao soldiers led by Long Tainan and General He Guang. Then he continued to lead the 2 army divisions to Wulong City, an important city in the north of Siam. At this moment, Siam's General Godin was in the city. He had just heard the news of the 5-star Army's attack. Not long after, he saw his soldiers being defeated. He also saw the 5-star Army soldiers in green chasing after his soldiers. The intelligence personnel had already reported the information. Every 5-star Army soldier who could wear a formal suit belonged to the elite faction. They were not easy to deal with. Although Godin had 200,000 soldiers, he did not dare to be careless. He immediately ordered his men to prepare to defend the city. Cannons, bows, rocks and kerosene were all prepared. For the sake of safety, he didn't even have the slightest intention of letting the 10,000 defeated soldiers outside the city into the city. Chapter 1039. If they didn't open the gates, they would only lose 10,000 soldiers. Once they opened the gates, the main force would be in danger. With the city's defense and the 50 cannons, they might be able to inflict heavy damage to the main force of the 5-star army. General Gordon was ambitious. This time he wanted to use his actions to humiliate the 5-star army. He wanted to tell them that the Siamese army wasn't like the Tsanglan army or the Phnom Penh army. They were capable of fighting. While Gordon was waiting for the enemy to approach the city, the 5-star corps stopped moving. They took out their 100mm mortars and aimed at the city tower. Gordon was waiting for the enemy to approach the city so that he could destroy one of them with his cannons. The 5-star corps stopped moving. They took out their 100mm mortars and aimed at the city tower. Looking down from above, Gordon saw that the 5-star army stopped moving when they were 5 miles away. He didn't understand what they were up to. He didn't have to wait for long before reality told him the truth. Luo Po ordered the cannons to open fire. The mortar cannons could fire up to 13 li away. Using Wulong City, which was only 5 li away, as a target, it was as easy as playing a game. A total of 40 cannons rained down on the city walls, causing blood to splatter everywhere. Gordon, who was waiting for the enemy to approach, didn't expect the enemy to open fire from such a distance. His cannons could only fire up to a distance of 1,000 meters. This caused him to subconsciously limit his vision. Then, amidst the explosions, he was knocked to the ground by the shockwave. Fortunately, the soldiers beside him were very diligent. They pushed General Gordon to the ground. With 1 dead, 1 heavily injured, and 2 lightly injured, Gordon was safe and sound. He only lost his hearing temporarily. Not only Gordon, the Siamese soldiers on the city tower also lost their hearing. Other than the buzzing sound, they couldn't hear anything from the outside world. After a round of bombardment, the 2nd and 6th Divisions started to charge forward. To the cold front warriors who had to train at least 3 to 5 kilometers a day, a distance of 2,500 meters was nothing. Under the cover of the artillery, they arrived at the city gate that had already been destroyed. After a round of gunfire, they opened up a path and easily killed their way into the city. On the tower, the 50 cannons that had been transported to the north tower had been reduced to a pile of scrap metal. Beside him, there were almost 1,000 dead bodies of the Siamese soldiers. The other survivors, including General Gordon, had already fled downstairs. In other words, it wasn't that they were useless. It was that their opponents were too strong. Facing the 2nd and 6th Division, who were fully equipped with firearms, the Siamese soldiers were caught off guard. They didn't even know much about them. Thus, they suffered a great loss in the first battle. The 200,000 soldiers of the Siamese army retreated like fish in the sea. It could be said that human potential was infinite. With the mentality of saving their lives, the Siamese soldiers retreated so quickly that the 5-star army couldn't catch up to them. Except for a few who managed to catch up, the main force of the Siamese army fled south. After the victory of the first battle, they killed and captured 30,000 Siamese soldiers. Wulong City was handed over to the Laotian army. After a simple rest, Luo Yin led the 2 divisions and continued south. The news of the defeat on the northern battlefield quickly spread back to Manga City. In the palace hall, King Yi Liqi showed an expression of disbelief, and asked a very idiotic question in front of all the civil and military officials. What is the 5-star army doing? Are they going to destroy Siam like they did to Lansang and Golden Rim? Proud people would always magnify their own strengths for no reason, but at the same time, they would also magnify their enemies' weaknesses. In Yi Liqui's eyes, Siam was the strongest army in the world. Perhaps it was a little weaker than the 5-star army, but they had their own strengths. How could they be bullied so easily? Yi Liqui's shout attracted a lot of discussion in the palace. Then Prime Minister Hamad stood up and said, "Your Majesty, the 5-star army is coming. Looking at the fate of Lansang and Golden Rim, we must be prepared for a war." Sure, let's fight. Who's afraid? Siam had just entered the era of big cities. In comparison, its politics were clean and the people were loyal. Its strength was not weak. This was also where Yi Liqui's foundation lay. Before the war, Yi Liqui had found Hamad and a few other important officials. After a discussion, they agreed that the 5-star army was not strong enough to destroy Siam. In other words, even if they lost the war, they could just lower their heads and give some compensation. The possibility of the country being destroyed was still very small. It was because of this point that Yi Liqui agreed to send troops. He wanted to take the 5-star army by surprise and reshuffle the cards in Southeast Asia. Now it seemed that it did play a role in the early stages. They even surrounded Yang Qindong. At that time, victory was so close. Unfortunately, Tong Si did not take advantage of this opportunity. In the end, he missed out on victory. Since they could not win, they had to think about how to stay in an invincible position. Considering the plan prepared before the war, Prime Minister Hamad continued, "Your Majesty, I request to send a message to the 5-star army to negotiate. Please allow it." Proved. Liqui had to nod and agree. Unless he was prepared to fight to the death with the 5-star army, he could only negotiate and use this method to quell the flames of war. Under the cold consent of King Liqui, the royal capital Bangkok once again gathered 200,000 troops to prepare for war. They were ready to support the various battlefields at any time. At the same time, they also sent a message to the 5-star army to express their intention to negotiate. The so-called peace talks were often the result of fighting. Fighting and fighting, fighting and fighting, everything came to a conclusion. In the end, it was a happy scene for everyone. After the Siam army lost the upper hand, the news of peace talks came. The commander of the East Army, Yang Qindong, who was leading the army to Siam, laughed after hearing the news. All of this was within his expectations. He even sent a telegram to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in advance and asked them to send people over. Peace talks? They killed so many of our brothers. Now that our reinforcements are here, they are afraid? They want peace talks. How can there be such a good thing in the world? Beta Persei muttered to express his anger. Beta Persei's opinion made Yang Qindong speechless. In this battle, more than 200 black cavalry soldiers and more than 4,000 soldiers of the 5th Division died. It was a heavy loss. But in comparison, what benefits did the Siam army gain? The number of people captured and killed had exceeded 120,000. This was already a 30-fold loss ratio. At this moment, the king of Siam was the one suffering, not him. But then again, the lives of the 5-star army soldiers were very important. How could it be compared to the Siam army? From this point of view, Beta Persei's words were not wrong. That's right. It's impossible to talk about peace and let this matter slide. This time we are determined to get Siam. Yang Qindong's attitude was very firm. Beta Persei's eyes lit up when he heard this. However, Yang Qindong's next words made Beta Persei a little confused. But based on the information we have, Siam prepared a full 800,000 soldiers before this battle. So far, we have destroyed about 200,000 soldiers. There are at least 600,000 soldiers left. Beta Persei, tell me, with our current strength, can we defeat them? Yes, 600,000 is. Beta Persei stopped mid-sentence. This was 600,000, not 60,000. The total number of soldiers of the 5-star armies, even if the average D Ping were to be included, they would only have around 150 to 160,000 men. Even if they wanted to destroy the enemy, they still had to split up their forces to defend the cities that they had occupied. Beta Persei did not speak, and Yang Qindong did not intend to ask any more questions. Instead, he looked thoughtfully in the direction of Siam. A bold plan was formed in his mind again. This plan could be expressed in a very simple way. There were only 4 words: training troops on the battlefield. Soldiers who had never been on the battlefield could not be considered real warriors. This was true for ordinary soldiers. After a few battles, Yang Qindong had already seen his disadvantage. That was, he had too few troops. If he was so weak to deal with the Siam army, wouldn't he be in the same predicament if he was forced to fight against a bigger force in the future? For the future, he also needed to prepare for military training. How could he create a decent army in a short period of time? Their strength could not be said to be on par with the Cold Front, but at least they had to meet the requirements of a B-level army. After thinking about it, the only good idea was to train troops on the battlefield. With the 600,000 soldiers of Siam as a whetstone, Yang Qindong wanted to see how many B-level troops he could train. In order to achieve this goal, more local battles were needed. That was to say, how to fight the Siamese army continuously and make them send out their troops without getting angry became the most important thing. Thinking about it carefully, it seemed that the best way was to talk while fighting. That was why he was so optimistic and hopeful about the upcoming negotiations between the two sides. Before Yang Qindong had to wait too long, someone from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs came. It was their minister Ma Dali. Yang Qindong was somewhat surprised by Ma Dali's personal visit. He was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who stayed in Chichen City to preside over the overall situation. How could he come out so easily? Seeing the obvious doubt in Yang Qindong's eyes, Ma Dali smiled bitterly and said, "Sixth young master, for the current Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the most important thing is the war with Siam, so I came in person." Chapter 1040. Haha. Hearing Ma Dali's sincere answer, Yang Qindong smiled. Diplomatic work was usually divided into three types: enemies, friends, and countries, regions, or forces in the middle. However, Yang Xie rarely had any hostile forces around him. In the end, it was because of their military and financial strength. It was said that a weak country had no diplomacy. If Yang Qindong were to add another sentence, it would be to strengthen the diplomacy of the strong. Yes, whether it was a strong military or economic power, diplomatic work was relatively easier. Whether it was because of the desire for benefits or the fear of military power, no one was willing to provoke a strong country or force. Therefore, compared to the heavy work of other departments, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was much more relaxed. Finally, there was a strong country like Siam, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs finally had a chance to show its strength. As the minister, Ma Dali simply volunteered to be here. Since the previous minister, Yang Shan, stepped down because of his son, Yang Taizhu, Ma Dali had not achieved any outstanding results. Without any achievements, how could he convince the masses? Even when Yu Qian, as the city lord of Crimson City, held meetings with the status of Prime Minister Yang, Ma Dali rarely spoke. He had been looking for an opportunity to show his strength. Now that the opportunity had come, how could he let it go? After knowing Ma Dali's thoughts, Yang Qindong did not make any comments. A subordinate who wanted to achieve results should not be discouraged. On the contrary, he should encourage him. Minister Ma, you have come this time. Whether you can defeat Siam or even win this war completely depends on your diplomatic skills. As long as you can hold them back, the longer the time, the greater the chance of victory. What do you think? Are you confident? Yang Qindong was telling him the truth. Ma Dali took this opportunity to ask carefully, "Sixth young master, have you made up your mind? Do you really want to defeat Siam in one go?" Ma Dali was like a poisonous needle that was inserted into the enemy's heart. Yang Qindong naturally had no intention of hiding it from him. "That's right. I've already made my decision." But Ma Dali hesitated for a moment. When he saw Yang Qindong's encouraging eyes, he continued, "But according to our investigation, Siam has just become a big city. Whether it is military, political, or economic, they are not weak. It will be difficult to take them down in one go." Difficult? It's like a spring. If you're strong, it's weak. Yang Qindong didn't care if the other party knew what a spring was, or if he could understand this saying. He still said decisively, if a person wants to grow, he has to go through some setbacks and difficulties. Similarly, if Yang Xie wants to expand, it has to do something that it knows is difficult. As long as it overcomes these difficulties, it will become stronger. Understood. Since Yang Qindong had already made up his mind, Ma Dali knew that there was no room for negotiation. He said, "Sixth young master, tell me, what do you want me to do next? What do I have to do?" "Aha, it's actually not complicated. You just have to do this and that will do." No one knew what Yang Qindong and Ma Dali talked about, but they only knew that early the next morning Ma Dali had set up a carriage and led a delegation of more than 100 people, representing the interests of the Yang faction, straight to Manga City. It was inevitable that some of the military officers couldn't understand the departure of the peace negotiators, especially the commander of the 5th Division, Xiao Yining. In the battle on the Barren Mountain, half of his division had died. This was a grudge that must be avenged. Why would they suddenly enter into a state of peace negotiations? Lu Zhua, the commander of the new army's 1st Cavalry Division, was also puzzled. He had traveled thousands of miles, taking a boat and rushing day and night. He hadn't even fought a single battle, and now they were going to negotiate? Then what was the point of him bringing the 1st Cavalry Division here? In the main tent, whether it was Xiao Yining or Lu Zhua, after Yang Qindong said that they could say anything and ask anything, the two of them took the lead to speak, expressing the puzzlement in the hearts of their subordinates. In response to their questions, Yang Qindong only replied, "Who said we're not going to fight?" Just this one sentence confused the two commanders. Xiao Yining reacted a little faster. "But didn't we already send people to negotiate with Siam?" "That's right," Lu Zhua quickly added. "Who said that we can't continue fighting if we're negotiating? It doesn't matter. They can talk, we'll fight." Yang Qindong waved his hand casually again as if they had all misunderstood. In response to Yang Qindong's answer, not only the two commanders, but also the other commanders in the main tent were confused. Even the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Tianhu, was puzzled. He also didn't understand what the 6th young master was going to do. What? Is it hard to understand? The young master meant that the war and peace negotiations can be carried out at the same time. However, when we fight, we don't have to send our main force to the front like before. Instead, we can send our reserve troops to the front. We can use this opportunity to see if there are any suitable seedlings. Yang Qindong saw that everyone was confused, so he simply explained it clearly. As soon as he said this, a few people were the first to understand. Especially Commander Jianghu. Where did his 1st Cavalry Division come from? Wasn't it formed by constantly fighting on the battlefield and gathering elites? This was going to continue the old path. Naturally, he had the most right to speak. He immediately said, "The 6th young master means to train the soldiers through war? That's what I mean. Of course, as veterans who have experienced hundreds of battles, this time, you have to do your job as instructors. Not only that, once you find a good seedling, you can apply for recruitment. The young master will give you a certain amount of talent support. Of course, you have to do your job as instructors and examiners. You have to score every soldier in the war. This is an extremely important matter. Do you understand?" When he said these words, Yang Qindong especially looked at the commander of the 5th Cavalry Division, Xiao Yining. The meaning he wanted to express was very clear. Isn't the 5th Cavalry Division lacking in soldiers? Once this war is over, the 5th Cavalry Division can be reorganized. Even though Yang Qindong's meaning was very clear, and Xiao Yining was indeed moved, there was still a problem that he didn't clarify. Otherwise he really wouldn't be happy. The 6th young master, if his performance is outstanding, can he be promoted? Of course. Otherwise, how can he join the 5th Cavalry Division? Yang Qindong said as if it was a matter of course. Good. I understand. At this moment, Xiao Yining's face finally revealed a smile. At this moment he even became a little excited. He was still thinking that with the current ratio of young and strong Han men in Crimson City, it would be difficult to recruit more than 4,000 people. If things went wrong, it would affect the strength of the 5th Cavalry Division. Now that they could train the soldiers on the battlefield and recruit good seedlings, the 5th Cavalry Division would definitely be able to quickly return to its former glory. After the general plan was set, Yang Qindong announced a few more details. For example, only those who killed 10 people on the battlefield would be allowed to be promoted. Other than that, those who performed well would be able to enter the B-grade troops, the auxiliary troops of Crimson City, and those who performed well would be able to enter the C-grade troops, the provincial troops. As for those who didn't perform well, they would be given money to chase them away. In short, they would only fight for the sake of producing elite soldiers. If there were really no suitable candidates, it would be better to not have them than to form an army for the sake of numbers. Otherwise, not only would they be scamming them, they would also be scamming themselves. On the battlefield, the enemy wouldn't be afraid because of the number of soldiers you had. On the battlefield, victory wouldn't be decided by who had more soldiers. Using battle to nurture soldiers was carried out in an orderly manner under Yang Qindong's decision. According to his requirements, any commoner between the age of 16 and 35 who was under the Yang faction's influence could sign up. Then, the various cities would report the list to the various provincial governments, and in the end, the provincial governments would transport the people to the battlefield. In order to encourage people to sign up, Yang Qindong also proposed that the number of soldiers each province could choose would have a close relationship with the provincial governor and the various officers at the end of the year. In the end, there would be a reward system, praising the provinces that performed well and scolding the provinces that didn't, etc. The temptation of being promoted was already very big, and now that it was directly related to the official rank evaluation, who wouldn't want to try their best? Immediately, under the encouragement and publicity of the local governments, there were many people who signed up. Batches of young men who met the requirements were sent to the North Army's new Second Army, Luo Po's, and the East Army's Yang Qindong's. In the East Army, the first army that was approved to train soldiers was the 50,000 Cambodian soldiers who followed Yang Qindong. Of course, this was not all the soldiers of the right age in Cambodia. With a population of 4 million, it was not a problem to select a few 100,000 suitable soldiers. These 50,000 soldiers were just the first batch of soldiers to be sent to the battlefield. The power of training soldiers was completely delegated to the 3 division commanders, Jianghu, Xiao Yining, and Lu Zhua. After a discussion, they decided to only send 2,000 recruits to the battlefield at a time. In order to ensure that they would not be surrounded by the Siamese Army, the 1st Cavalry Division, the 1st Cavalry Division of the new 1st Army, and the 5th Division of the Lu Zhua Po would send veterans to accompany them. They would only be sent out when they encountered suitable opponents, so as to ensure that they could complete the training requirements under the circumstances of equal strength and strength. The five-star army had sent out envoys according to the king's request, and the troops were heading to the capital, Bangkok. For this reason, it was said that the five-star army in the south had stopped their attack on Pattaya. After receiving this news, the Siamese army, which was originally very nervous, immediately relaxed. Chapter 1041. It was at this time that a scout suddenly reported that a small unit of the five-star army had left the border city of Bob and was heading towards Shafa city. After hearing the news, the Siamese army was very puzzled. The Siamese general guarding Shafa city immediately sent people to stop them, as if he wanted to persuade them to stop moving forward. In the middle of Bob and Shafa city, the two sides met. On one side was a Cambodian army of 2,000 people, and on the other side was a Siamese army of 5,000 people. The veterans of the five-star army who followed and protected them quickly made a decision. This battle was worth fighting. At least in their eyes, if they were the ones fighting, they would not need 2,000 people, but 1,000 people would be enough to win. With this decision, the first training of the soldiers began. The mixed soldiers were mixed soldiers. They did not have much training and most of them relied on brute force. The result of the first battle was no surprise. More than 300 of the 2,000 soldiers were killed on the spot, and the rest fled back. According to the information obtained by the veteran scouts, not even 100 Siamese soldiers were killed. When the news reached Yang Qindong's ears, he was not surprised at all. Some soldiers who had not undergone systematic training were just a bunch of brute force. They did not even have a basic degree of cooperation. It was impossible for them to defeat the disciplined Siamese army. Just like the so-called Jianghu people, they might be a headache if they fought alone, but once they gathered together, no matter how many of them there were, they would not be a match for the imperial army. If the army made up of Lao men really wanted to win, they would have to learn how to cooperate, get used to blood, and really mature. Then they might have the qualifications to defeat the Siamese army. Of course, this was not something that could be done overnight. Fortunately, Yang Qindong had time to wait. Even if more of these people died, Yang Qindong would not show any sadness. These were all alien races, and for a certain period of time, he had even thought about how to stop the growth of the alien race population, and what kind of attitude and methods he should adopt towards these adult alien males. This was one of the methods that Yang Qindong had thought of. When a foreign woman married a Han man. From the looks of it, the effects were pretty good. Now that they had the advantage of sacrificing foreign men on the battlefield, even if foreign women wanted to get married in the future, they would have no choice but to choose Han men. This was a way to eliminate the foreign race. At the same time, it was also a kind of gospel for the Han men. It was also a vicious method that Yang Qindong used to unify the Han people. Perhaps some people could see this point. Perhaps there would be people in the future who would comment on this matter. Some people might even criticize his backbone because of this, but Yang Qindong did not care. What he wanted was the day when the Han people became strong and dominated the world. As for what others thought of him, it was not important. To paraphrase a saying, who cares if there is a flood after his death? The first attack failed, but soon the second Cambodian army was sent out. They were either inspired by the fact that the five-star army, with less than 10,000 people, could fight for so long against the Siamese army and won a great victory, so they looked down on the Siamese army. Or maybe the conditions that Yang Qindong gave to the victors were so good that they could not bear to try. Or maybe it was because they wanted to prove themselves through this battle. They wanted to tell their relatives in their hometown and their women that the five-star army was not the only one in the world who knew how to fight. They were real men and they could do it too. Regardless of the reason, there were waves of Cambodian soldiers. Under the control of the five-star army, they were divided into groups of 2,000 people and entered the Siamese territory, looking for an opportunity to fight the Siamese army. At this moment, in the capital of Siam, Jianghu City, Minister Ma Dali had appeared as the representative of Wuxia. He was warmly received by Prime Minister Hamad. What was a politician? The performance of the two men was obvious. No matter how fierce the battle was before and how many people were killed or injured, when they met this time, their faces were full of joy. Those who did not know the inside story would definitely think that the two men must be old friends. They would never think that they were scheming against each other. On the way into the city, Hamad even prepared a small welcoming ceremony to show the people that Siam still loved peace. Even when the situation was good, they still negotiated with the emissary sent by Wuxia. This showed that they were broad-minded. Yes, in the hearts of most of the Siamese who did not know the situation, they were the most powerful when they had just entered the city. Even in this battle against the five-star army from the beginning until now, they had always been in a dominant position. Not long ago, there was news that the leader of the five-star army was surrounded by them. If it were not for the sake of peace in the future and wanting to persuade the leader to surrender, they would have killed him directly. That was a war where hundreds of thousands of people surrounded less than 10,000 enemies. Even if everyone spat, the war would have ended. Ma Dali walked beside Hammond with a smile on his face as they crossed the street. In fact, he and his team had heard the discussions of the people on the streets. Those who were able to enter the Foreign Affairs Department were naturally knowledgeable people. Among them, there were many graduates of the Yang Family Academy and the Crimson City Academy. When they entered the school, they were exposed to a course called Foreign Languages. In the words of the founder, Yang Qindong, if you want to defeat your enemy, you must first understand your enemy. For this reason, Ma Dali had brought many talents who understood Siamese into this team. Even he had no problem conversing with them. With this advantage, the conversations of the people on the street naturally fell into their ears. This allowed them to have a deeper understanding of the situation in Bangkok and obtain first-hand information. All of this was outside of Hamad's expectations. He was certain that there were people who understood Siamese in this team, just like how there were people who understood Chinese beside him. However, the number was definitely not too many. Otherwise, he wouldn't have lined the streets to express his sincerity. Both parties passed through the commotion and finally arrived at the courtyard in the city that was specially used to receive foreign ambassadors. Upon entering, the originally smiling Ma Dali and Hamad seemed to have changed into a different person. Their smiles were retracted and replaced with a solemn expression. Esteemed envoy Ma, you must be tired from the long journey. Take a rest for the night. If there is anything else, we will discuss it tomorrow. Hamad didn't immediately enter his role. He needed to give Ma Dali some time to rest. He also needed to think carefully about what to do next. Ma Dali acted as if he didn't understand Hamad's words. Only when the interpreter translated the words into Chinese did he nod and say, "Thank you for your understanding. Since that is the case, we will meet again tomorrow." When he said that he would see her the next day, no one would have thought that this delay would be half a month later. Of course, at this moment, Hamad was truly prepared to have a good discussion with Ma Dali tomorrow and see what the other party wanted. Therefore, after settling down the five-star army ambassadors, he headed straight for the palace. According to his intention, he would first report to the king and receive a general decree. Upon entering the palace, not only did Hamad see the king Yi Liqui, he also saw another first-rank general guarding the western border of Siam, Chun Hong. According to the great Ming dynasty system, Chun Hong was considered a relative of the emperor. His sister married Yi Liqui and was deeply favored by the emperor. Because of this, he was promoted several times from a small general station with 100 soldiers. In the end, he became a first-rank general, second only to Gordon. Relatives of the king were not allowed to interfere in politics. This was the same everywhere. Thus, Chun Hong had no choice but to leave the capital and head to the safest western border of Siam. He became a first-rank general in name and was mainly responsible for dealing with the Awol dynasty. To put it bluntly, he was completely a figurehead. This time they had started an all-out war with the five-star army. They had seized the initiative and were now in a stalemate. The situation was gradually developing in a bad direction. It could be said that it was the time for the entire country to mobilize their troops. As a first-rank general, Chun Hong naturally returned. Not only that, when he returned, he brought with him good news that he had just received from the military. The five-star army's attacks from the north and east had suddenly become weak. News of the Siam army's victories came from the front lines. Translator. Nyoibo Studio Editor. Nyoibo Studio. Good news made Yelinki very happy. After knowing the purpose of Chun Huang's visit, Yelinki immediately welcomed him. Yelinki knew the whole story and knew that the five-star army had been launching attacks every day. Although the scale of the attacks was not very big, it was a real attack. The Siamese army naturally fought back. Originally they were expecting a fierce battle. But who would have thought that the five-star army could not fight anymore? Is this true? King Yi Liqui's face was filled with disbelief as he asked. Yes, there are battle reports from all sides. One of them was written by General Gordon himself. Chun Hong said with a face full of flattery and joy. As the saying goes, love the house and its crow. Since he liked Chun Huang's sister, Yi Liqui naturally did not dislike Chun Hong. Now that Chun Hong brought news of victory, he could not help but laugh heartily. This was the first time Yi Liqui laughed heartily since the start of the war with the five-star army. At this time, Hammond entered the palace to report the situation. When he saw the king laughing so happily, he was also curious. "Your Majesty, when did you become so happy? Tell me and I will be happy too." "Ah, good. General Chun, tell the Prime Minister about this." Yi Liqui was in a good mood and immediately agreed. Chapter 1042. With a smile on his face, Chun Hong turned around and bowed to Hammond. He then said, "Prime Minister, news just came from the front lines. The Five-Star Army's attack is weak. After several battles, they have suffered heavy losses. Our side has won. And this is all thanks to His Majesty. His Majesty's troops represent the righteous. Even the heavenly sect was moved, resulting in today's victory." Chun Hong did not forget to take the opportunity to flatter the king. At the same time, he was carefully observing Hammond's reaction. Just like in most dynasties, civil and military were at odds. In Siam, civil and military rarely got along. In particular, the reason why Chun Hong left the capital for Xizang was because of the advice of Hammond and the other civil officials. He hated these people from the bottom of his heart. But because the king valued these civil officials, he had no choice but to deal with them. But no action did not mean no thoughts. During his time in Xizang, Chun Hong was constantly thinking about revenge. This time he was looking for an opportunity to do so. In his view, if he wanted to take revenge, the first person he had to deal with was the Prime Minister, who wielded enormous influence in the court. If he did not topple this mountain, once the war was over, he would probably have to return to the western border to suffer. Prime Minister Hammond didn't think too much about it. At least at this moment, his mind was completely focused on government affairs. When he heard Chun Hong say that the situation on the front lines was starting to turn for the better, he was truly confused. If not for the fact that he understood General Gordon and knew that this person was the worst at lying, he would have doubted the veracity of this matter. Since even General Gordon said that the front lines had won, Hammond had to think carefully about what was going on. From the bottom of his heart, Hammond did not believe it. A five-star army that could defeat the Jiaoji Kingdom, the Lansang Dynasty, and the Golden Bian Dynasty, as well as occupy the Luzon Island and a large area of the sea, they stunned everyone from the moment they appeared. With their strong financial resources and powerful military capabilities, there were few who would not follow their orders. How could such an army suddenly have such a low combat strength? This didn't make any sense at all. Hammond suddenly stopped talking. He didn't express any opinion and just stood there with a frown on his face. Chun Hong saw all of this and it was difficult for him to find a weakness. He had no choice but to continue asking. "Prime Minister? Why do you look unhappy? Are you unhappy that the army won the battle at the front lines?" After this reminder, even King Ilichi paid attention to it. But out of trust he still said, "How can that be? The Prime Minister is the Prime Minister of Siam. He will naturally be happy to hear that the frontline army has won the battle." "Yes, of course I'm happy." At this moment, Hammond also recovered and hurriedly replied. But after saying this, he still voiced out his doubts. It's just that the five-star army has always been known for their extraordinary combat strength. Why did they suddenly become weak this time? Weakened? Chun Hong finally caught the opportunity and said, "How can it be weakened? It should be because our Siam army is too strong. Under His Majesty's wise leadership, we have vigorously developed our military. The treatment and training of the army are the best. Why can't such a good army win the battle? Prime Minister, as a general leading an army, I really can't agree with what you're saying. The Siamese army was indeed stronger than the other neighboring countries. But if it was said that they could easily defeat the five-star army, Hammond would never believe it. He decided to see for himself and personally go to the front line to see for himself. "Your Majesty, I am willing to go to the front line. Please allow it." This was Hammond's strength. He would not easily agree with the opinions of others. He would only make a decision after seeing the results. This was also the reason why Li Chi felt at ease using him, so he didn't even hesitate and agreed to this request. Hammond had something on his mind, so he didn't stay for long. Before he left, he only said that the emissary from the five-star army had arrived, and before the battle was completely settled, he still had to receive him with courtesy. He then left the palace hall, leaving behind Chun Hong to watch him leave. He said with some dissatisfaction, "Your Majesty, he doesn't trust our army and General Gordon." "Sigh, General Chun, don't think too much. Prime Minister is such a serious person. It's good to let him see. That way we can rest assured." Yi Liqui was not influenced by Chun Huang's words. In his heart he didn't really believe this news. He also hoped that someone could make a trip. Hammond's volunteering was exactly what he wanted. Ma Dali, who was in the emissary group's courtyard, did not know about this. The next morning, not only did he not see Hammond, who was supposed to be here, but everyone was also grounded. Considering that the two countries were at war, they were not allowed to leave the courtyard for fear of being affected. Fortunately, food and drinks were delivered in time. Otherwise, the minister would have to consider whether Siam was going to reveal their true intentions. The training of the soldiers on the northern and eastern fronts continued. The battle situation did not improve. The 40,000 Laotian soldiers on the northern front and the 50,000 Cambodian soldiers on the eastern front were sent out for battle for the third time. Relatively speaking, they would still lose against the Siam army. It was just that they did not lose as quickly. However, it was still far from a draw. It was also at this time that a steady stream of reserve troops arrived. After receiving Yang Qindong's orders, the provinces immediately started recruiting soldiers. The attractive policies were also spread to all the provinces under Yang Xie's control. Once they performed well, they could be promoted. Such a temptation tempted the foreign youths, who knew the power of the Han people, to no avail. With the opportunity in front of them, there were not many who did not want to seize it and give it a try. There were many such applicants. In a short period of time, 200,000 youths had signed up. It was said that this was only a portion of the total. There would be more applicants in the future. Since there were so many people who wanted to sign up, Yang Qindong naturally did not reject any of them. Yang Xie, who did not lack food, was never afraid of having too many people. He only despised having too few people. When the new batch of soldiers arrived, the disadvantage on the battlefield became even more obvious. In contrast, the morale of the Siam army was increasing day by day. The continuous victories had made some of the soldiers feel smug. When they found out that as long as they encountered the five-star army, they would definitely be the ones to win. Although they didn't get much, they still had some achievements. They could report their military exploits and receive money. Therefore, everyone became more active. This was especially true when they discovered that their numbers were too large and they often couldn't find an opponent. When their numbers were only around 2,000, the five-star army would take the initiative to jump out. They immediately divided their troops into groups of 2,000, allowing them to obtain more small-scale victories. A small victory was still a victory. Wasn't there a saying that went, "Many a little makes a man"? The Siam army was tirelessly busy. There were reports of victory every day. They were delivered to the commander of the army. Prime Minister Hammond, who had come to understand the actual situation, saw everything clearly. The battle reports were real. From time to time, some corpses of the five-star army soldiers would be sent back. These could not be faked. All of this made Hammond speechless. Even the Siam army in the east had achieved such a great victory. With General Gordon leading the army in the north, there was nothing to doubt about the results. What was going on? Was the five-star army's strength not enough due to the continuous expansion? Or was their standard just average to begin with? It was just that people had made them legends. Hammond could not understand this question. However, there was no need to think about it. Since they had achieved victory on the battlefield, there was nothing to be afraid of. He had to immediately return to the capital to report. At the same time, he had to change his strategy against the five-star army. Negotiations could be discussed. However, this time he did not have to compromise. Instead, he had to force the other party to compromise. This was something he had to consider. Satisfied, Hammond left. On the morning of his departure, news came from the security bureau. Yang San had arranged for Yun Ke, who was recuperating in Chichen City, to return to Siam. With Golden Rooster Wu Gui's mistake, Skylark certainly didn't dare to be negligent and relax. He secretly watched the situation closely. As soon as the people left, the news came. They're gone? It's time to win a few battles to boost morale. After reading the report from the security bureau, Yang Qindong happily said to Beta Persei beside him, "Have you calculated the number of qualified soldiers in the past 20 days? Young Master Tianhu Xiaoyining and Lu Zhua have reported the data every day. As of last night, there are about 35,000 soldiers who can be considered veterans." Beta Persei quickly replied. It was obvious that he had learned a lot from following Yang Qindong. This number is not low. Yang Qindong seemed surprised. He silently calculated in his heart. It turned out that they had trained nearly 2,000 soldiers every day. This was the benefit of actual combat. Survival of the fittest, war had the final say. Facts had the final say. In between life and death, people's potential could often be maximized. With that in mind, Yang Qindong opened his mouth again. Since it's like this, inform the 3 division commanders, they can adopt the strategy of the old leading the new. Out of the 2,000 men they can choose 500 old soldiers to lead 1,500 new soldiers, and if the old soldiers have outstanding performance, they can be gathered together, and according to their performance, this young master will promote them, and according to their performance, we can decide if they will enter the A-grade army or B-grade army, and they can be the best candidates for the various divisions. Chapter 1043. After 20 days of training there were finally results. Beta Persei also agreed happily. And it was from this day onwards that the situation on the battlefield began to change subtly. Similarly, the enemy was no longer defeated by the 5-star army after encountering each other. Sometimes they could even fight to a draw, and occasionally they could even turn defeat into victory. At first, the Siamese army did not feel anything about the changes on the battlefield. When someone reported the situation to his superior, the general did not take it seriously. He thought that it must be his soldiers who were slacking off. That was why they praised the enemy so highly. For this reason, the general even scolded a few of the informants. He suppressed the informants with the authority of a superior officer. Suppressing the gourd would lead to the emergence of the ladle. Suppressing some matters by force might not necessarily lead to a good outcome. What was more frightening was that on the battlefield, if you underestimated your opponent, there would only be one outcome: death or defeat. In the blink of an eye, 10 days had passed. More and more ambitious young men under the Wuxia forces came to the battlefield. More and more people began to participate in the battle and displayed their advantages. As the number of actual combat increased, many men with excellent results were reflected. Among them, the number of people who were promoted by Yang Qindong alone exceeded 5,000. All of them had been tested in actual combat. They had participated in more than 20 battles, both large and small. Among them, the weakest one had accumulated 20 kills on the battlefield. With the demonstration of these 5,000 young men, the young men of the other races were greatly stimulated. They performed even more bravely and fiercely on the battlefield, strengthening the transition from new recruits to old soldiers, and also increasing the proportion of old soldiers. At one point, the number of old soldiers had reached over 60,000. The 5-star army had achieved such great results. The Siamese army felt it the most. They had originally prepared 120,000 people, all of whom were trained soldiers. But now the number of people was less than 50,000. Seeing that the 5-star army's offensive did not weaken and was still so strong, they had no choice but to send a request for reinforcements to the capital. It wasn't that they couldn't defeat the 5-star army, and it wasn't that they didn't fight with their lives on the line. It was just that there were too many of them, so many that it seemed like they would never be able to kill them. In fact, the 5-star army had paid a heavy price. Countless recruits had died in the first battle. In terms of numbers, they were not inferior to the Siamese army. Mangu City suddenly received a request for reinforcements from the East Army, which was beyond the king's expectations. Didn't they say that the battle at the front lines was going well and that the 5-star army had suffered heavy losses and that they wouldn't be able to hold on if this continued? Why was it his own side that needed reinforcements? What kind of situation was this? Countless question marks involuntarily appeared in his mind. Liqui immediately summoned Prime Minister Hammond and First-Rank General Chun Hong to seek their opinions. The two representatives of the civil and military officials hurried into the palace. Just as they were confused, Liqui threw an urgent letter for help at their feet with an unfriendly expression. "Take a look and see what's going on." The two picked up the letter and their expressions quickly turned heavy. Chun Hong was the only first-rank general in the palace. In fact, he had been in charge of military affairs and understood the situation at the front lines very well. Indeed, the news of victory had been constantly spreading. As time passed, he had already gotten used to it. He wouldn't become so excited because of the news of victory. In fact, in his opinion, this battle should be over soon. Perhaps, it would be worth celebrating when they achieved a great victory over the 5-star army. Needless to say, Hammond personally understood the situation at the front lines. 10 days ago, the news of victory was still spreading. Why did they need to request reinforcements from the royal capital so quickly? Could it be that the 5-star army's reinforcements had arrived? When he thought of this, Hammond suddenly remembered something. The intelligence personnel he sent to investigate the 5-star army hadn't contacted him for 7 to 8 days. Logically speaking, if there was any situation, They should have contacted him at least once every 3 to 5 days. But this time it was so long. Did something happen to them? What did this mean? The faces of the two ministers became heavy. However, without enough understanding, how could they know what to say at this moment? He was facing the king. One wrong word, one wrong decision, and it could bring about terrible consequences. The two didn't speak, but it didn't mean that the matter would pass. Looking at the two who had turned mute, Liqui's displeased voice sounded again. What? Why aren't you speaking? This king is asking for your opinion. Liqui was about to get angry. Chun Hong was afraid and couldn't help but raise his head and say, Your Majesty, perhaps the 5-star army sent reinforcements. After all, the battle has been going on for almost a month and the battles are fierce every day. The soldiers at the front lines must be exhausted and need fresh blood to ensure victory. Exhausted? So in your opinion, are you going to agree to send reinforcements? Liqui heard this ambiguous answer and asked in displeasure. According to the rules of the battlefield, the soldiers can't be used frequently. We should send reinforcements. Chun Hong knew that he couldn't continue wavering. He could only grit his teeth and express his determination. After Chun Hong expressed his opinion, it was naturally Hammond's turn. Logically speaking, he had lost the support of his informants and should first understand the situation before making a final decision. But this time Liqui was in a fit of rage. If he gave such an answer, it was clearly inappropriate. During this period of time, Chun Hong had been active in the royal city. He had already roped in a lot of ministers and had also said a lot of bad things about himself. At this moment he absolutely could not do anything wrong. Otherwise it would be like handing over his weakness to his opponent. Your Majesty, this official also believes that we should send reinforcements. But the matters at the front lines shouldn't be too urgent. Your Majesty should also take care of your body. After coming to a decision, Hammond's expression relaxed and he replied fluently. Hearing Hammond's tone wasn't heavy and even seemed to be relaxed, Liqui's heart was greatly reassured. He knew his prime minister too well. He had always planned before acting. Since he said it was fine, then there shouldn't be much to worry about. But before Liqui could speak, Chun Hong, who saw him as a thorn in his side, took the initiative to express his opinion. Prime Minister, how can you be so sure that there won't be any problems? First there was a light chuckle. Then the confident Hammond said with confidence, There are 3 reasons. First, General Dong Dong sent an urgent message of 300 miles. If the matter is urgent, he should send an urgent message of 800 miles. Second, General Gordon of the Northern Army hasn't sent a signal for reinforcements. It can be seen that even if the 5-star army sent reinforcements, the scale is limited and can only support one side of the battle. Third, the location of the battle is within Siam. Compared to transporting supplies and fodder, we have a shorter distance and faster speed. Even if we compare the expenditure, the 5-star army won't be able to afford it. When the 3 points were mentioned, Ha Chunwang shut his mouth. He knew that he wasn't a match for a scholar in terms of eloquence. Moreover, this was the representative of scholars, Hammond. Hearing this, King Liqui was very happy. Good, as expected of my prime minister. What you said is reasonable. Even if the 5-star army sent reinforcements, we should also send reinforcements. This time, we will let them see the strength of Siam and let them know that we aren't comparable to Lansang and Golden Rim. We, Siam, are the strongest and cannot be defeated. Following Liqui's laughter, the matter of sending reinforcements to the Eastern Army was settled. In order to deal a heavy blow to the 5-star army, they sent out 100,000 reinforcements. At this point, Siam's original 800,000 troops had been sent out to 500,000, more than half of the original force. The scholar and military left the palace. Ha Chunwang snorted and rolled his eyes before leaving Hammond behind. He didn't bicker with him because he still had many things to do. For example, sending out intelligence agents to investigate the situation at the front lines and find out where the previous intelligence agents had gone. For example, it was time to have a discussion with Ma Dali. In his eyes, this was a war where both sides would suffer losses. The sooner they stopped fighting, the sooner both sides would benefit. And so, in the diplomatic mission's courtyard, after 25 days, almost a month, Ma Dali finally met with Hammond once again. Haha, Prime Minister, you are so busy. Upon meeting, Ma Dali mocked the other party. Speaking of which, he couldn't be blamed for being so angry. After being ignored for almost a month, anyone would be angry. Before coming, Hammond had already expected Yang Xie's special envoy to be unhappy. He immediately cupped his fist and said, "My apologies, my sincere apologies. There was a small problem at the front lines. I just finished dealing with it. The first thing I did after returning is to see you." "A small problem at the front lines? What's the matter?" Through the interpreter, Madali pretended to understand and asked. "So." At first he looked pained, then Hammond raised his head and said, "Isn't it because there are too many captives at the front lines? My king is benevolent and has sent these captives back to the royal capital. There are so many people who need to eat, so I, as the Prime Minister, have to take care of them. That is why I have neglected you. Please forgive me." As Hammond spoke, he paid attention to Madali's reaction. He wanted to see something from this person's expression. But he didn't know that he didn't understand Madali at all. Specifically, there were 3 things he didn't understand. First, as Yang Xie's foreign minister, Madali's ability to communicate with people was outstanding. He was also the best at reading people's expressions. Any small mistake made by an opponent could be caught and analyzed. So, it was better to forget about playing mind games with such a person. It would be good enough if he didn't fall for others' schemes. Chapter 1044. Secondly, Madali understood Siamese. After diligently studying for the past 20 days, he could be considered proficient. This gave him more room to think and react. On the surface, it seemed like he still needed to listen to the interpreter, but in reality he already knew the specifics and had already begun to react. Thirdly, and the most important one. This time the diplomatic mission was equipped with a telegraph. This meant that whenever he needed to know about anything that happened on the front lines, Yang Qindong would report it to him, allowing him to understand the battle situation and Yang Qindong's thoughts so that he could determine the next step. All of this had been carried out in secret. On the surface, it seemed like the 100-odd members of the diplomatic mission hadn't left the courtyard, but they were well aware of the situation outside. As for the specific changes on the battlefield, he had even learned of them a few days earlier than Hammond. With these 3 advantages, if Hammond still wanted to play tricks and schemes with Madali, wouldn't that be asking for humiliation? It was clearly victory that had turned into defeat, yet Madali was still pretending to be the victor in front of him. Hearing this, Madali sneered in his heart, but pretended to be extremely shocked as if he was panicking. "What? Sir Minister said the 5-star army suffered a great defeat on the front lines? That's impossible, impossible. Our reinforcements will arrive soon, although they are untrained civilians." At this point, Madali suddenly shut his mouth, and with an awkward expression, he took a sip of water from the cup in front of him. It seemed like he did it in a moment of desperation, but it was actually for Hammond to hear. The crux of the matter was how he said it to the other party, and how much of it the other party would believe. From the looks of it, his goal should be achieved. Indeed, he had achieved his goal. Madali's performance was too realistic, and in addition to this sudden question, people would often involuntarily answer the most realistic situation. More importantly, Hammond was certain that Madali didn't know what had happened on the front lines, so he didn't have time to lie to the 5-star army. Of course, the most important point was that the result of his analysis was that the 5-star army had reinforcements. Madali's answer coincided with his own inference. However, he did not expect that the reinforcements would be untrained civilians. If all of this was true, Siam only needed to block the attacks of the 5-star army to turn the tables and regain control of the battle. Immensely excited by this sudden news, Hammond suppressed his decision to negotiate with Madali. He only expressed his concern for food and accommodation, saying that since they were in Bangkok they were guests. If there was anything they needed, they could ask at any time. Following that, Hammond left with an anxious expression. He was indeed a little anxious. He needed to report the situation to the king, and then reconsider how many reinforcements to send. In the Siamese palace, King Yaliki was overjoyed when he heard Hamad's report. So, the 5-star army did send reinforcements and it should have been discussed beforehand. It's just that they have no reinforcements to send, so they sent some civilians? Yes. This special envoy has been out for more than a month. Naturally, he wouldn't be clear about the situation on the battlefield. The fact that he mentioned reinforcements should be the policy that the 5-star army agreed on before he came. Haha, congratulations, Your Majesty. The 5-star army has sent out all of their elites, and now they even need to send in civilians. Facing these untrained people, apart from their numbers, there is nothing to be afraid of. Hammond bowed and congratulated. This caused Hammond to burst out in laughter. Ah, good. Lord Prime Minister, you've handled this matter well. Now that we know the truth about the five-star army, in your opinion, how should we deal with them? Your Majesty, I believe that the enemy's only advantage is their numbers. If we can dispatch more soldiers to join the battle and create an unstoppable momentum, I believe victory won't be too difficult. Hammond, who had already come up with a plan on the way here, said excitedly. Minister Zhou means to continue to send in reinforcements? Li Qi roughly understood the meaning behind these words. Yes, continue to send in reinforcements. As long as we can defeat the five-star army, victory will not be difficult. We can even use this opportunity to expand the territory of our Siam kingdom. Hammond, who was brimming with confidence, had a smile and excitement on his face. Li Qi had always valued Hammond's ability. After hearing his analysis, Li Qi felt that it was reasonable. He nodded and said, there are still 300,000 soldiers in the capital waiting to be deployed. In your opinion, what should we do? Forgive me for being so bold, but your Majesty, please show your courage and only leave 100,000 behind. Send 100,000 reinforcements to the north and east respectively. Attack with an overwhelming advantage and completely frighten the five-star army. Strike their morale and this battle will determine the outcome. Right, since we have sent out so many reinforcements, the battle strategy must be changed. We can't just send out 2,000 people at a time to engage the enemy in guerrilla warfare. We should gather them together to achieve a deterrent effect. Good, then we will immediately convene a court meeting to hear the opinions of the officials. Seeing that Hammond's words were reasonable, Li Qi had already agreed to 70% of it. The so-called meeting of the officials was just to discuss some specific matters. The king had already agreed in his heart, and the minister was also in full agreement. Naturally, no one in the court meeting would be blind enough to stop them. Even though Chun Hong wasn't happy that Hammond had stolen the limelight, he could only watch hatefully from the sidelines. After sending 100,000 reinforcements to the east, the capital sent another 100,000 to the north and east respectively. At this point, Siam Kingdom had sent out 700,000 of its 800,000 regular soldiers. It was not an exaggeration to call it a war of the entire country. Since Siam Kingdom sent reinforcements, Qingci, who had been left in Bangkok, sent the news through the radio. Yang Chendong was also very happy when he heard the news. Siam Kingdom also sent a large army to their deaths. It was like someone giving him a pillow when he was sleepy. Pass down the order. Tianhu and the others are to come to the main tent for a meeting. The main force of Siam Kingdom's army was finally sent out. This gave Yang Chendong the opportunity to defeat them one by one. This was also one of his plans. Otherwise, with the 800,000 Siam Kingdom's army gathered together, Yang Xie's army might not have the strength to do so. Yang Chendong called Tianhu and the others over and informed them of the Siamese army's movements. Yang Chendong then asked them to change their tactics. Since there were so many enemies, they would not play a game of 2,000 against 2,000. But to say 100,000 against 100,000 was not Yang Chendong's intention. The so-called excellent commanders on the battlefield had to think of ways to take the initiative and then guide the situation of the battlefield to develop as they wished. Yang Chendong was undoubtedly an excellent commander, so he made the decision to change the battle from 2,000 to 5,000 people. At the same time, he also made a tactical decision to retreat when necessary, lure the enemy to chase and then force the enemy to split up. To put it bluntly, if the enemy's forces were relatively concentrated, then retreat. There was no rush to fight the enemy. When the enemy began to split up, then look for an opportunity to fight. It was like eating rice one bite at a time. The tactical plan was decided and the next step was to execute it. There were still some days before the main force of Siam Kingdom's reinforcements arrived. This was the time the five-star army had to prepare. It could be said that there was plenty of time. It had been more than 2 months since the battle with Siam Kingdom, and this was one of the few times Yang Chendong fought a battle. Looking at the past, Yang Chendong preferred to use the method of cutting the Gordian knot when destroying a force or a country. For example, when he attacked North Korea, he did it in a spurt of energy and did not give the enemy any time to react. When he attacked the Phnom Penh dynasty, which was now Cambodia, it only took him 31 days from the first shot to the end. The reason for this result was that 1. He was well prepared and 2. He had sufficient military strength. But this time the well-prepared side was Siam. They first made all the plans, then they began the attack with 800,000 soldiers. They caught Yang Xie off guard, and the time limit of the battle was constantly extended. Fortunately, Yang Chendong finally controlled the rhythm of the battle. Next, it was time to watch the performance of the five-star army. Siam Kingdom's reinforcements began to appear on the battlefield. First, they gathered in the eastern border city of Siam Kingdom. Then, in an echelon of 50,000 soldiers, a total of 550,000 soldiers went out of the city and pressed against the Five-Star Army. The Five-Star Army, which had been prepared for a long time, immediately began to withdraw their forces. They kept retreating, showing that they did not dare to fight. In order to attract the enemy's attention and find a suitable opportunity to attack, they retreated back to Cambodia. In the beginning, some people were worried that if they retreated from Siam Kingdom, the Siam Kingdom's army of 250,000 soldiers would continue to pursue them. In the face of such worries, Yang Qindong gave a very positive answer. A greedy person would never be satisfied. Look, the Siam Kingdom would not stop advancing because of their retreat. After all, they were the ones who launched the first attack. Their intention to expand was very clear. The fact was as Yang Qindong expected. When the Five-Star Army retreated from Siam Kingdom and returned to Bob, the border city of Cambodia, the Siam Kingdom's army crossed the border and chased after them. Obviously, the arrival of the 200,000 reinforcements boosted the morale of some people. They wanted to make a big contribution. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.